Here at the Still 80 Mania podcast, we are passionate about drifting history. Here's a little history lesson. Back in 2003, Falken Tires did what no other tire company in the US did. They promoted drifting by sponsoring Falken Drift Show-Off, and they brought legendary Japanese drifters Koguchi and Seigo Yamamoto to judge and do demos. They sponsored grassroots drivers, and when FD was established, they supported the series and drivers for 19 years. When we approached Falken about partnering with us, they were happy to come on board because they care about drifting culture, and they support our mission to document drifting both past and present. Thank you, Falken Tires, for playing an important role in drifting around the world and for making Season 2 our best season yet. For more information, please visit Falken Tires' website at falkentire.com and check out their IG at Falken Tire. You're listening to the Still 80 Mania podcast Season 2, brought to you by Falken Tires. Here we document the history of drifting by interviewing the OGs and trendsetters of drifting culture. All right, we have an OG in the house today for the Still 80 Mania podcast. We have, he is a Bay Area drifting pioneer. He was one of the earliest Drift Day instructors back when we were doing Drift Association Drift Days. He was a pro D1 and Formula D driver from 2003 to 2009. He was the first driver to win a Formula D round in an import car. He was the author of the Calvin Wan's Drifting Performance Handbook, and he's an overall nice guy. I would like to welcome Calvin Wan to the podcast. What's up?
Hey,
Yay!
what's up?
Yeah, I'm glad you're finally able to join us in the podcast studio. You're remote, but we're glad to finally get you on. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. And you guys' set looks so legit. I'm kind of jealous. I wish I was there hanging out with you.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, you got a nice set too. Like, we're not in an Eichler. For those that don't know, an Eichler is a mid-century modern architect. Right, and he'd made a lot of houses. They're gorgeous. If you've never seen one, take a look. But like, if you can see the video, Calvin's got this huge glass window next to him. Eichlers have lots of natural light. So hey, you look good too, man.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, we kind of just moved in here. You know, we're kind of trying to get in this Eichler experience and see how it is. I studied industrial design a bit, so I kind of knew about mid-century modern. So
nice.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. We're only mainly here because it's a school district for my daughter. She's starting high school, so it's in an area where she wants to go to school, but who knows how long we'll be here for. But we're trying to, just experience this.
You're speaking our language.
Yep. Let me know.
School districts.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
School district. Yeah.
And I love that your car's on the wall. Like, that's the best. So if you're listening to audio, flip over to the YouTube version to see.
What is that? Sonoma? Where is that?
That was Monroe, Washington.
Oh,
so
okay.
That was like Formula D 2006 when I used it as a backup car. But that was the first time they competed in a Formula D event. It was still kind of like a personal, backup car at a point. And
Love it.
I was there because of a G35 incident, I think with Ken Gucci or something. So I had to use my personal car for that round before the G got fixed. So yeah.
Nice.
Memorable moment.
Welcome.
It's always cool to be able to compete in Formula D in your personal car. I mean, it's good and it's bad, right? It's a cool experience because you still have it, right? So
yes, yeah, right. I have it, and it was all together for the longest time, and then I recently just stripped it down, took it all apart, and it's going through a whole rebuild process. It's taking a bit longer than I thought, but it's a stripped bare shell, and it's getting repainted right now at a body shop. So hopefully it'll get
what color can you tell
rebuilt
us?
Back. So I've always wanted a white FD, like ever since I gotten FDs, and then the car was originally silver and it was painted white, but I was autocrossing back then, and for some reason I picked a Chevy Corvette white back then when I did original white.
Yeah,
and I regretted that, and I was like, damn it, why did I pick a freaking Chevy white? But it was a clean white back then. So no now, pearl. It wasn't a pearl. It was just like a clean, basic white that wasn't too yellow. It's not too blue. It just had a good kind of, medium white tone that I liked. But I want to keep it more like OEM Mazda now. So I picked a FD white that only came into Japan whites, like, cause FD's kind of had like a 92, 93 year that had this earlier, chase white that was like different than the US one. I think it might have a little more yellow in it, but at least it's original Mazda making on the earlier FDs. Mine's a 93 as well. So it's period correct and all that. So it's kind of get properly painted in
Interesting.
Mazda OEM code.
So.
I can't wait to see what comes out of that project.
Yeah, me too.
So let's start this podcast off with the first question. When did you fall in love with drifting, Calvin?
Yes, so that's actually a very prominent moment that I vaguely really remember.
It should be.
Speed, yeah, I drifted earlier than this. Like, I think my first time attempting the drifting was probably like in '96. Different story, front wheel drive car and all that, and then other stuff. But the moment I actually fell in love with it was back in '02. So Speed Trials USA had that, or those track days that had a drift run group. So I only went to one of those. It was probably like fall of '02. I had my street FD at the time. I autocrossed a bunch back then, like in that era in '02. And then I think they were running, it was like, I guess like the East Loop or something, like the side that had like the hill, like Phil's Hill, Button Willow. Mm-hmm. And then there was like the end of the dry strip, and there was a right-hand sweeper. And that sweeper kind of connected like the straightaway to the S's. So it was like a bigger corner.
Yes.
So I was focused on that corner and just wanted to hit and drift that whole corner. It was the biggest turn I ever tried. I never tried drifting on the actual road course before. Mm-hmm. So it took a while, like multiple sessions, and it kept spinning, and I would drift certain sections and straighten out. And when I finally nailed it, like I drifted, and I would trail brake. I didn't e-brake or anything back then. At autocross style, I was trail braking. So I'd come at speed.
It was your racing experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was autocrossing, so that's what you did. You trail broke and you rotate the car, and you just stay on throttle and carry it out. Mm-hmm. So I was using that technique, and like I was able to finally like drift the whole corner and then power all the way through and finish into the S's. And like that moment was like I celebrate like I freaking won the event. I was like, dude, like it was amazing.
Yeah.
So after that, I was just straight up hooked. Like where I'm like, all right, I was racing a bunch. I did dry racing, autocrossing. I'm like, drifting is just the freaking most fun thing ever to do. Like, and now that I've been waiting forever for drift events to happen because I knew about it since literally like '94 when I first got my license. And through option videos and all that. But '02 was the first year they actually first start having US events. Yeah. So I was on like Club 4AG, drift forums and all that, and like drifting.com or whatever. And I found out about all the SoCal events that was going on. There was nothing in NorCal. Everything was in SoCal. So that '02 event was the first time. And then Drift Day was happening then. So I hit up every Drift Day, and then Ikaten. So that '02, beginning of '03 was the start of it all. That was the start. For me.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Tommy from Speed Trial. If you haven't caught the episode yet, we did interview him in season 1. The Tommy Chen interview. He ran Speed Trial, and he was the first one in on the mainland, at least. I'm not exactly sure who did it first, Hawaii or mainland, but it was the first drift event that we were able to do. And it wasn't labeled a drift event, right? Because we weren't able to do that. So if you want more information on that, check out that episode. And so let's talk about your early days. Like, how did you get into cars? How did you find out about drifting?
So I've always been into cars like forever. Like even before I was driving, I was collecting car magazines. That's kind of all the toys and RC cars were all car related. I did a bunch of skateboarding and BMX and all that too, and rollerblading back then in the '80s. So I actually was into things with wheels and sliding around all that. But got my license in '94. It was a hand-me-down car from my mom. They're in the American cars at the time, but not cool American cars. Pontiac Grand Am, but I would do burnouts in it. I would go in reverse, freaking slam and drive, mean one wheel burnouts, and then like neutral drop, like floor it, neutral, back and drive, and chirp it. Like I would freaking like I kind of destroyed that car mechanically, like but I made it look. I mean, not cool now, but I lowered it, tinted the tail lights, put exhaust on it, like stuff you wouldn't do to a car like that. But it was a car I had, so I just wanted to mess with it. But I was always into driving, and then like I kind of destroyed that car, so it would barely running, it would overheat. So my mom kind of had to get me something new and reliable. But she was only into American cars, and I was like, well, I was kind of following the drag racing scene. So in the 90s,
that was what was big in the 90s was drag racing, especially import drag racing. A lot was going on. There's a lot of records being broken, and you could see the sport progress. Yeah.
So I followed all that, like, with the whole Honda scene. All my friends in high school was into Hondas. And then DSM too, like some of the Mitsubishi side with the Eclipses were coming out and Talons. So I wanted one of those type cars. Even Volkswagen was cool with Jetta Golf VR6s and all that, but I thought that was a little too expensive, and mom had a budget, and then she ended up getting me a Dodge Avenger, which is super embarrassing to say, but it was basically a long wheelbase Eclipse. So I had the NA, it was like a 420A motor, but it was 2-liter, 16 valve. But some of the parts, the same motor, it was basically a long wheelbase Eclipse with a different body fit. So, not like the nasty Ford sedan ones that came later. Like the first gen was decent, I guess, but not really. So I had to fix it up with like, do research and figure out, like, check out like suspension coils on Eclipses and Talons and Gallants and all that, and figure out what the heck suspension I could use. I ended up getting some iBox. And so I had to put in work to figure out how I can mod that car up and make it a little cooler.
Yeah.
But I started drag racing with that. Ended up nitrosing it, like put a 60 shot NOS, and it started running 16.8s, and I got it down to 14.8s.
That's
so
pretty
that
fast.
was 14s was kind of quick in 96, so
definitely.
maybe 97. So like I was into that and learned how to clutch kick and launch and, with burnouts. So that kind of helped with the whole drifting.
You did that really young, because I kind of did the math on some of this, after doing research. And I think you and I are maybe you're a year older than me. But for you to do that in 96, you were doing that really young.
Yeah. So 96 was when I graduated high school too. So I'm class of 96.
Yeah.
But that car is when I got that. I drove in 94. So, and I was looking at all the option magazines back then, because my mom used to go to Japantown. I would just go to a bookstore with me and just check out all the magazines back then.
Yeah.
Even before I was driving. And then, Sport Compact Car and Turbo Magazine was kind of a bigger, title back then. So I would look at all the drag racing stuff that came out of there. I would just attend Sacramento Raceway events just to watch at first when I had my Grand Am, just to kind of check it out. And then I started drag racing at Sears Point. Wednesday night drifts, they had like a high school class. So I was deep in drag racing, and I actually went to this shop called Revolution Motorsports. So Leo Now actually was an owner then, and he sponsored me. He was my first sponsor, and he actually was trying to build turbo kits for NA Eclipses. And mine had the same setup, and it was a different car. And he's like, "Hey, I'll sponsor you because it looked different, I guess." And I don't know, I guess kind of cool. But we went through 3 different turbo kits, and it wasn't really set up that properly because we were using the same exhaust manifold and made custom flanges, and oil return line was at the bottom of the oil pan, so that screwed up 3 different turbos.
Yeah.
So I was deep in drag racing for that bit, but because of that incident, the turbo hurt the motor, and I basically needed to rebuild the whole motor. But because of that car, I had to get a beater car, something cheap to get me around. So I got a Toyota Starlet. So it was like a $500 Starlet that I found. And I autocrossed in the Avenger one time at a Dianza event, and I saw all these dope Corollas, like A86s and Starlets that were fast as hell. And I was like, ooh, that's dope. So Starlet was cool because there were some guys that autocrossed that. And then that got me in a rear wheel drive. And after that, I was like, okay, forget front wheel drive.
Got it.
Rear wheel drive car now. And this was like 97.
Okay.
So had a Starlet, and then got into Toyotas, and ended up picking like up a A86, like a 86 coupe 2-tone. I did more autocrossing, but I met like with that car, I met like Antonio, like, and then a bunch of these Daly City like Corolla guys, like Gaylord was there, and like
a lot of
Hiro
a
Fujita,
lot
like,
of the A86 scene in the Bay Area back then was big. And there were a lot of Filipinos doing it too. And so I was just, as you were telling this story, I was like, you had to have met up with Antonio and the guys up there if you were in a Hachiyaku's in that time.
Yeah, let's name the guys. Let's do the quiz. Like, name the top. Name the guys. First and last name. There's Gaylord Garcia. Antonio Alvendia, but he's from down here.
Well, no, he
originally was from San Jose.
Yeah.
Who else did you meet up there?
So like
people that we would recognize. Hiro
Fujita, he was up there. And then like this was Daly City folks, and then like I think Herman If, he was an all-crosser at 86 back then too. A few other guys too, but we kind of had like this Daly City crew, and we kind of started this like A86 driving club. And then back then I actually co-founded this graphic shop called GraphTech Graphics with Jay Abbott in 98. And then we would make stickers for cars. So I helped design this silhouette of an A86, and then, you know.
You did that design. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
I designed that. And then, you know, I made like all these GTS stickers, you know, and even had one that was like GraphTech Signworks in the GTS and all that. But it was, I was in that car scene. We did car shows. I actually was with Spintronics and DJ'd, and we actually set up sound and lighting for actual like concerts and car shows too. So we're in car shows, like kind of setting up background stuff in graphics, doing the stickers, and we actually set up booths. Sometimes when we did gigs at car shows, we set up a GraphTech booth and cut stickers on the spot back then too. So I wasn't a show guy, but I attended a bunch of shows, and I had my cars in shows and did graphics on it too back then a little bit, but I was more like into the driving, drag racing, and then autocross, and, you know, did some road racing as well, and then drift. So I was more driver oriented, but those were the early years.
So, but how did you get into drifting?
So I knew about drifting from all the auction videos. So we would, you know, we would watch with some of the Symphonic guys too. Like we would hang out at, you know, some of the houses like Sutomu.
Well, let's talk, since you brought up Team Symphonic, let the listener know, what is Team Symphonic and kind of where that came from?
Yeah. So Team Symphonic, that was a crew that kind of was already formed in NorCal. So Stomu was one of the main guys in there. And then there was, like, Ivan and like Victor Choi and Victor Nomura. Victor Nomura was not an A86 guy. And then like, we had a kind of this crew that they would kind of be in the mountains. And then I was actually, friends with Dan Pina, and then me and Dan Pina was going to, you know, Academy Art or something. We were driving on our own back then. And then I had my FD, and I knew some FD guys from the forum. So Ivan and, Victor were RX-7 guys, so FD guys. So I found out about them, and then we kind of heard from them that like, yeah, we got a friend that actually got like a Skyline GTR that's actually running around with us too. And I was like, what the hell got a freaking like R32 GTR? Like crazy. I want to meet this dude.
Yeah. So
we were in the mountains running around, like, you know, we met, you know, Four Corners in this lot, and then we saw this gray GTR and ended up being a V-spec and everything. And it was Hubert Young. So Hubert Young, like he, you know, like that was the first time I met him. And then I was like giving him props for actually driving this baller car that was freaking, you know, crazy expensive, in the mountains. And like, you know, we all just hung out a bunch and just drove around a lot, like really late night. And then, like we kind of met up with Alex Pfeiffer as well. Some of the people from there, but actually probably more with the Daly City AA6 people. Mm-hmm. So we met with Alex Pfeiffer in like Marin side when he used to live in Marin, like Mount Hamilton area and all that. And we would go kind of late night and kind of meet up with him. So there was kind of like this group of NorCal guys that was driving a bunch.
Yeah.
But you know, there wasn't any drift events or anything back then at all. So we would kind of do our thing and just like find really screwed spots and, got a little practice in, but, not that much. It was a little more grip driving, but we did kind of have certain spots that we just concentrated on some drifting a little bit. But
at this time, were you in the Starlet still, or 86, or what were you driving?
That was actually in the Corolla. So I had 2 different A86s at the time. So I had the blue car, and then I traded one of the 86 with this John, and then there was like 2 brothers, like Yves and John, and John had like
I know John and Yves.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were part of that Daly City crew, and then so I traded John the teal car for my my 86 blue tone 2-tone. So that car actually was a little lighter and a little better suited for autocrossing, which was cool. It was an aftermarket paint job, but I mean, I liked how it drove better. So I was like, cool. So we traded, and then that's the one that I met up with Alex in the mountains and all that. So we kind of I had like an A86 crew that kind of I was rolling with, and then my FD that I had, and the FD actually came after. So got rid of the Avenger. I actually got an E30 M3 first in '99, and then
wow,
I only had that for a year, but it was a '99 to 2000 that I had it. I got a high mileage, and maybe 160,000, and it went up to 180,000, and it needed like a full rebuild and everything. Like the clutch was going out. Everything on that motor was super expensive to repair. So I was like, ooh, okay. I kind of wanted something more like stronger. That thing had a power up top, but not that much torque. But it was beautiful, and I lowered it, and I loved the car. But the amount to rebuild it was a lot. I wasn't ready for something like that, and I wanted something stronger. And I was always about, FDs and Supras and all that. Those were the dream cars back then.
Yeah. So
I was like, with that money, I can just get, spend a little more. And I got an FD for like 15,000 back then, where it's a lot more now, but it was manageable back then from selling a car and getting something else, little by little I chipped away at it. So but the FD kind of had me driving more out across that a bunch. And then I met up with the other FD guys. I met with Symphonic. So we all kind of rolled with that crew kind of after, but I still had the Corolla on the side as well.
Yeah.
The second car.
That must have been pretty crazy if anyone saw Team Symphonic driving and then you guys had an FD and an R32. Like that must have been pretty wild looking.
Yeah. So that was a cool crew that we had, and we didn't really interact with other groups or anything, and we just kind of hung out.
Yeah, you guys were just friends, right?
Yeah, we just go to Stomu's house and just watch like option videos and just kind of hang out.
That's dope. Tsutomu could probably translate a lot of that stuff for you, where it's like, for us, we were watching all these videos and we didn't know what they were saying.
Yeah. It was always just pictures and numbers and whatever English brand names that they kind of showcase.
Yeah.
That's always how it's been.
What years were this? Like, where you guys were all cruising?
So, because I got my FD, the M3 I had till 2000. I sold it to a friend of mine, Milton Rodriguez, who's a friend now, but I didn't know him back then. So I had my FD in 2000, and so it's probably 2000 to 02 was kind of when we were doing the Symphonic thing. And then we even rented out we'd do private events at Bunwillow and rent out like East Loop, and then just do maybe the 15 of us and just do grip events, and kind of did that early on too, and drifted a little bit, but it was more grip because I don't think they allowed drifting back then. So we kind of did those events and carried it on till later as well, and then made them drifting events. But it was just kind of these smaller private events that they can rent it for cheaper and all that.
Well,
but yeah.
Do you have any funny Alex Pfeiffer stories during that time?
Yeah. So when we met with Alex, that guy was always a character. He would just hang out in his sandals, and just kind of pound beers and just,
Did he have a shirt on?
All that. He had a shirt because it was nighttime,
Okay.
So we would meet up at night, and he had this place in Marin that we went to his house and hung out to after. But, he would kind of just pound beer and tell stories about, how things were in Hawaii and all that. And then, take us to a spot and like, I kind of forgot if I got a ride. I think I did get a ride with him once. So I was having trouble in this one corner because I actually had like some R compounds that I was driving on because from autocross setup, it was driving R compounds. And then he was showing us this one corner that we kind of shine all our headlights on. We just kind of go back and forth on it. And then he hopped in my car. And then first thing he do, he was in his slippers and he would take off his slippers and just drive barefoot.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell? This guy just drives barefoot? Like, he's super long toed. He would bear claw the freaking pedals. I was like, oh my God. Like, I guess you get more grip like that. So that was, and he's always done that. Like, at drift day events when it's chill, no suits, freaking sandals off and just barefoot freaking the pedals.
Yeah.
So
he was becoming one with the car.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you can't do it on a freaking stripped out race car. It was like the 4-pan and tunnels would get super hot.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. I'm like, you gotta wear shoes, buddy. Like, that's gonna burn your feet. But yeah, Alex was super chill and it was fun kind of hearing his stories and all that. And that dude was so early on that he knew he was one of the best. He was the best drifter back then because we all kind of just did single corners here and there, but he actually could connect corners and all that.
Yeah.
So like he had experience over all of us. So we were just kind of like looking up to him at the time and like he was showing us what's up.
Yeah, we were in the interview that we had with him last season, I was talking about that Button Willow event that you just mentioned when you fell in love with drifting. That was the first time I saw Alex Pfeiffer live. And, I was excited to see like what he could really do because I knew he was before all of us and he already had experience and just, I told the story about how, like you were trying to link the two corners, right? And I was trying to link two corners. And while we were trying to do that, Alex Pfeiffer was just mangying everything in third gear. Like it was amazing how good he was back then.
Yeah. He definitely did it before all of us. So he was able to understand the transitions and all that. Like I was still kind of in this single corner thing. And then, I tried drifting with the front wheel drive, the Avenger back in the day in 96, and I would just pull and drag e-brake everywhere. Yeah. And to a point where I actually slammed the back of it onto a curb and busted my rear suspension. And that made me kind of stop practicing. Yeah. I was like, crap, I just busted my car. So I knew about it and tried, but it wasn't to the level of like where events was able to actually bring you to the higher level because you can't really drift on the street properly. And I definitely don't recommend that nowadays for anybody because there was no events back then. We didn't have anywhere else to practice. Right. But nowadays there's so many events that you could do. You can learn so much more at the track.
Agreed. So I think something that people don't take into account when they're trying to learn on the street is it's hard to focus on improving if you're always on the lookout for cops, pedestrians, oncoming traffic. It's just not a good learning environment. So we a lot of us did that because that's what we had to do. But then, a lot of our peers, like they saw the bigger picture. They started hosting drift events and got us off the street.
Yeah. So that was amazing when that happened. Because I was waiting since the 90s for that to happen. Like I didn't know about the 96 Iketan when it first came out. I saw
no one did.
After.
Very few people knew.
I was like, what the hell? There was an event. And like I actually knew about drifting before that. And then I saw that in a magazine later. And I was like, oh, when the hell did that happen? But I didn't even have a rear wheel drive car at the time. But like 02 with speed trials and then Drift Association, I was like, oh, but Iketan was the first one. So January 17th, 03, that was like the memorable, like first ever.
You remember the date?
It's the date.
Yes. Like that's 03 was like that was like the start of it all. So like,
where were you that day? Tell us about that day, January 17th.
So that was an Iketan that auction video held at Irwindale Speedway's parking lot. So like they didn't do anything event. That was the first ever event. And it was kind of like an invite event, I believe. I forget how I found out, maybe through Club 4AG or something. But yeah, it was, there was all of us here. You guys were there, like, I think Koguchi, Pfeiffer. Mm-hmm. We brought down some NorCal guys. So like Jay Lapid came down, Dan Pina, and then the Symphonic guys came down. Like Hubert brought his car.
Hubert brought a S14.
No. Oh.
Right? I think he did.
Hubert brought his brother's S13. His S13, his brother James
Yes,
had
right.
like a SIL 80 set up, but I forget what was the SIL 80 back then, but it was a blue hatch.
Yeah.
S13. So he ran that car. And then Victor Nomura, he was actually in a red A86 coupe, and he did the best and kind of went furthest out of all the NorCal guys. So we were like, yes, like representing NorCal.
Yeah.
So, so we had a whole kind of group that caravan down. And that was just amazing seeing, like, because at that event, there was, like Tarzan came out.
Tarzan was there. Akira Ida was there.
Yep.
Nomuken was there.
But
right?
It was
Nomuken was there?
and and then the signal car. Who was driving the signal car again?
It was Komatsu.
Komatsu, yes, Drifter X. So they were doing the demos and that, and I was like, that was the first time kind of seeing like legit drifting live.
Yeah.
So that was like, ooh, okay, that's how you run this course. And like before that, I was just only doing single turns. So I was like, crap, like I still had to work on my transitions at that event. So I was still learning.
Yeah. A lot of us were. And then to make things even harder, there was a little rain gutter right at the apex of the first corner. And that was messing up like everyone. Yep.
So they kind of like power through it, lift off, and power back out of it, because that would spin people out like left and right. I think they did that on purpose just to make it entertaining and see people mess
Probably.
up. That's how option was.
And walls everywhere too, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was the start of it all. And it was cool as, we were in like a option Drift Tengoku event.
We were in the like thing that inspired all of us, right?
Yeah. So that was the start of it. But the next event was Drift Show Off.
This episode is brought to you by Lot USA. Lot USA has been the master distributor of Brid racing seats for the past 18 years. Celebrating their 42 years in operation, Brid manufactures high-quality performance products for circuit, drag, GT, and drift.
Nadine and I have always run Brid seats in our cars, and even today, Brid seats are the latest mod in our new drift car. Our favorite seats are the FIA-approved Zeta 4 and the reclinable bucket seat, the Stradia 3.
One of the latest releases from Brid is the Zeta 4 Vireo, which is a size small version of the Zeta 4 for petite drivers. Visit lot-usa.com for more info and follow them on IG at lot_USA. This episode is brought to you by Bartleby. Bartleby is a car builder and tuner in the Central Texas, Austin area. In addition to other Nissans like the 350Z, they specialize in GTRs, R32 through 35, and has over 10 years experience. In terms of tuning, they work with most standalone ECUs like Motec, M-Tron, Link, Haltech, and AEM, to name a few. Bartleby has tuned some of our friends' infamous cars, including J-Spec Sam's blue R32 GTR. When we get our GTR, we know where we're sending it to get tuned. Bartleby. For more info, visit bartleby.com and be sure to check out their dyno tuning videos on IG at Bartleby.
So, Drift Show Off, this was March of 2003. That was a big eye-opener. We actually saw like legit multiple car tandems there. So Falken kind of pulled off this huge first off event, and then they brought Koguchi and Seigo over in S13 and Chaser, and then Signal brought some cars too.
Signal, they brought Komatsu, they brought Chunky Bai.
Yeah, so seeing like those tandems in person, that was kind of like the first. I mean, Ikaten was cool, but I don't know if they did much tandems there, and it was a smaller course.
I feel like they barely did any demo at all.
Yeah, it was very short. I think they did a couple runs, but it was mainly us running. Yeah. So it wasn't as big of a like shock
eye-opener.
When we saw it. Yeah, eye-opener like on Drift Show Off. So I was like, whoa, that's how you freaking like drift legit. And I was like, damn, like we need to do that. And they were just grazing walls where a lot of them actually start grazing and like, knocking bumpers off and all that. So I was like, oh, they're getting down, and all these outer clips. And so we weren't quite there yet, but I mean, I had my FD, I was still kind of learning and, ran a course, but didn't run it as clean as some of you guys. So you, Benson, you were the star on that event. Like, you were legit and you're so 80.
That was a weird one because I never felt like I was running the best that day, but I didn't spin out. I did not make any major mistakes, and that I feel like that got me through the end. But yeah, there are definitely some like really talented guys out there that I beat out just through consistency.
Yeah, no, that was cool because you were one of the early guys that did some earlier drift days, and you had some seat time, where I knew it was drifting early on, but I didn't get as much seat time as some of the SoCal guys and some of the, and we had some NorCal people come down too. And I had an S14 at the time, and Hubert actually borrowed my 14 for that event.
That was yours. It was white, right?
So that was a black Koki.
Black. I got it all mixed up. Okay.
Yeah. So that was mine that Hubert used. And like Jay Lappin went down with his white S13 coupe. And I forget how many other people went to that one, but like that was a fun event. I was still learning at that time, so I was kind of looking up to you guys. I was like, oh, these SoCal guys kind of know what's up. And then but that first event, at the end of it, I actually met Nick from Falken. So Nick Fonseca is like, he met me in a parking lot and noticed my red FD. So we connected the first time ever there.
He's an FD guy.
So, Nick's an FD guy. So I guess me and him connected because of FDs.
Okay.
And then, so I met him for the first time there after the event, actually, in the hotel parking lot. We ran into each other. And, that kind of started off the Falken relationship. We didn't do anything at that point. It was just like a, introduction at that point, but that was huge for my career to meet Nick at that point, and for him to pull off that event, hearing the background story from your early podcast on how that came about.
Yeah.
I chatted with him in person back in the day about that. Like, he kind of started with Falken recently, and that was his first event that he put together, and it was huge.
Yep.
Like,
so huge for the culture here. If he never did that, who knows, what it would be like. But yeah, that literally kicked off drifting in the US because there was so much media magazine coverage at that event. Like, there was like every single import tuning magazine, and even outside of that, like, had coverage of that. So that kind of blew things up, and it started, other events down the road. So after that was like, I think RSR Drift Festival in April was the next one. Yeah. And Orito came on that. Orito was awesome because during practice, I was drifting my FD on the infield, and then I was still having a little trouble transitioning because just my handwork wasn't as quick enough, and I didn't know of like the feeding technique, so Orito actually hopped in my FD and drove my FD at that event during practice, and he showed me what's up. Wow.
So on a left-hand drive?
Yes.
Nice.
So I was like, I thought it was the car or my setup or my suspension. I was like, dude, it's so snappy. It just spins on transition all the time. What the hell? Like, it's my car. I thought it was my car. And then Orito just all over the place, just ran that course super clean. I was like, holy smokes, like, oh, that's how you do it. So Orito actually taught me how to transition and drift properly, and then he showed me that the FD was super capable, even with my setup. So I was like, thank you, because back then we were all learning. We didn't have instructors to show us what's up. The Japanese pros that came, they were the ones that's the experience.
I don't know that he did that with anybody. I had never heard of that story at all. So you're really lucky.
Did he
got super lucky.
Did he even talk to you? Like, does he speak English, or how did that happen?
He didn't really speak English. I forget how we communicated, but it was probably like, at an FD, and then I don't know, I was struggling, I guess, during practice, and then like I maybe weighed him down, and then I don't know what I did. I can't remember how he got into the car. Maybe I was like, could you show me something? I don't know.
But you asked him.
I think so. And then I was maybe asking him, like, the transitions, I had problems or something. And then he somehow hopped in there and drove and showed me, and, real basic single words that he said, but just from me watching it in person in my car, like taught me like from then on, like how to transition. And
awesome.
I was good after that.
That's a trip right too. After. Yeah. Like when you're in Japan, a lot of people, well, when the Japanese drivers come here or we go over there, I think like left-hand drive versus right-hand drive, like it's always kind of, it trips people up, right? It's really hard to just jump into the opposite side and like do your thing on the track. So he's the man.
But Arito's the freaking, he's a pro like legend. So I mean, like he had so much seat time. I'm sure he actually probably driven left-hand drives at some point, you know, during all his filming, because they would do like the hot versions or best motorings where like they would test all the cars, and some probably were left-hand drive cars. So I mean, he was one of the legends that came out, and I was like, so that was like starstruck moment where I'm like, oh my god, it's Arito, and he just drove my car and taught me how to drift. Holy smokes. So that was amazing. I really appreciate him for that. And I don't know if he was hopping in other people's cars like that. I did
not notice that at all.
Well, ask and you shall receive, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was super grateful for that.
That's awesome.
And then that was probably the only drift instruction I got during those days. And then after that, I was just learning on my own. And then we did all the drift day events, and then we would just practice on our own, figure it out. And then later on, when other new people would come out, you know, we were all just kind of just start helping out other drivers and instruct them based on what we knew. So Arito was probably the only one that actually taught me a little bit about drifting. So everything else it was self-taught.
You figured that I think that says a lot about your natural talent with drifting, because it didn't I kind of saw you in the early days and you progressed really, really fast. And I never knew that no one really helped you and that you were self-taught. So, you know, hey, you're like naturally gifted at driving.
Yeah, appreciate that. Like, I think during a time I was so dedicated on trying to learn and focus. Like, I went to like literally every single possible drift event I could, and everything was in SoCal. I was up north, so I would drive my FD down. That was my daily one and only really car that I had. I guess I had my Corolla back then, but I drove that car mainly, and then just would drift at every event, and I would practice at, you know, these were competitions. So I would literally just practice and learn how to drive during these competitions. And every single like month and event, I would progress. And then, you know, I got to the point where at, you know, from, I think Drift Day 5 was the first competition. And like, I was able to like run that course cool, and I ended up winning that event. So that was like the first win I got in drifting. So I got an award from all that. And then after that, I kind of start instructing with Club 4AG. And then, you know, D1 driver search that came up, you know, shortly after that. And that was huge. That moment, because I followed Keiichi like all through the 90s, and that guy was just like drift god. He's drift king for a reason. And like, he literally made the whole drifting into this motorsport.
Yeah.
So when I saw him at D1 driver search, like that was like my all-time like driving idol. So I was running my red FD at the time, and I was able to do that course well, I thought. And then, you know, I kind of just barely made that cutoff. And then, you know, at the end, when he actually selected me as one of the 8 drivers to qualify to get a D1 license, that was like that was a transitional moment in my driving career that didn't know was going to be a career at the time. That was a pivotal moment because I made the D1 Grand Prix event, you know, for that happened later on. And I got my D1 license as a first group. So from that event on, I kind of start getting the sponsorship with Falken and Apex. But I thank them a lot. Like Apex really helped me out. And then I got a lot of parts from them at the time to fix up the red car. But, you know, D1 happened, and then, you know, ended up destroying it. But it was a good time, you know, leading up to it.
I want to talk about that, because that was a big moment. I think, I don't know how it affected you, but it was a real eye-opener for the rest of us, because we always felt like, you know, when we did the driver search, when we did Ikaten, like there was, it was dangerous to kind of step our game up, right? But none of us had really wrecked. And to see it with our own eyes, like that is possible. It kind of, I also think we were really young and for a certain, like we felt invincible. I feel like a lot of that just comes with young age and inexperience, right? And kind of to see that with our own eyes, it was kind of jaw-dropping, eye-opening for us. Like, can you take us through what it was like to experience that, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah. So taking it back just a little bit of the little incidents that happened before that, like the FD was a super clean car. I had that recently painted, and then, started drifting events, and did a US drift event, and then there was a tire stack at the end, and I manji'd and like hit that tire stack at the end and did my first kind of major damage on that. So I was like, and it crunched the door and all that. So going to the D1 event, it was already not a perfect car, but yes, like what you're saying about like, not thinking about big wrecks at the time because it hasn't really happened. And we had all these parking lot events, and the Irwindale events were just still kind of mild where it wasn't grazing walls and things.
Yeah.
So that was like, I didn't feel any of that in the beginning during practice. During practice, I was running actually really strong where I was able to drift the whole bank and transition and come into the infield. And I was one of the few of the US guys that was actually clearing the entire bank. We ran very low at the time though.
Yeah, that was the first course. The first course was, you clip the apex, right? At the very bottom of the bank, and then you start traveling back up. We don't see that course anymore, but that's how it started, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the earlier ones, like in driver search, but the D1 Grand Prix, the actual main pro event, like I think the start point was the initiation at the end of the main bank. So a lot of the Corolla guys couldn't drift the bank. So like, I think Ethan Whale and all that, like they would initiate at the end of the main bank and then lead into a transition, go into the infield.
Correct, yeah.
But I actually saw the Japanese guys start nailing the whole bank. So I was like, ooh, let me try that. Like, I have some power. Maybe I could hang the whole bank too. And I tried it, and I was able to have just enough power to hit the whole bank.
How much power were you running?
So I was running stock. Well, actually, I had 99 spec turbos. And then it was tuned with a Power FC with Apex. So it made like, I think 356 horsepower at the wheels. So
that
it
was
wasn't
good
a ton,
back then.
but that was a decent amount of power back then. So I drifted it, but during practice, I messed up one time. So coming into the infield, I spun and actually hit during practice. So I spun back into the left corner and the front hit as well. So it damaged like my tie rod. And then when I hit the back, I didn't realize it messed up my baffling in my gas tank. So like, I didn't really have a crew back then, but like Jay Lappin was there with me. And then like he helped me freaking wrench on the car and got my car like situated enough to just be somewhat ballpark aligned again in the front. And then the back, and we were just scrambling because it was during practice, and I had to qualify soon. So we barely just got the car situated right before qualifying. And then we forgot to fill up gas. So first run out, we had 3 runs. First run out, right when I hit the bank like normal, it was sketchy, but I still was able to initiate. It buckled. It like did a big hiccup right in the middle of the bank and went down on power and was a fuel cut. So the gas was sloshing in the tank.
Yeah.
And FD was already known to like have really bad baffling in the tank. So if you're not at half tank, it will starve fuel and do a fuel cut.
Mm-hmm.
So that started happening on the first run on the bank. So that straightened me out a bit on that first run. So on the second run, I had to go harder and then start bucking a little bit harder because it was slowly running lower on gas. So that second run, I think I was able to run it and barely kind of make it, but it was hiccuping and I might have strained out or maybe not, but like it wasn't good enough. And then so I'm like, all right, forget it. Like car's already wrecked. Like I just need to go all out and charge and carry as much speed as possible just to clear it and overcome the fuel starvation.
Yeah.
So
I went as fast as I could, initiated the main bank, and it was bucking even worse, like because it was lower on fuel, and just kind of stayed on it floored the whole freaking time. And then it was way offline at the bottom, came up really high on the exit of bank, and I had to transition really low. Because of that bad line, like coming into the infield, the line was off. It was too sharp of an angle coming back up. So I spun. And then when I spun, like I backed into the K wall where it was like not the permanent walls in the infield. It was ahead of that. And that was scary because it was a single K wall at the time. And then it hit so hard that the back rode up on top of it and basically did a skateboard like freaking axle grind on top.
And right in front of the judges' stand. Yeah.
And there was like a crowd of people there. Yeah. Like, I was like, oh my God, I could have ended drifting right there. Like, I was like, it was crazy. Yeah. So, like, luckily no one got hurt. And then, but I actually have like random, like, people that attended that D1 that was there. And this one guy, Nate, his last name, like, I ran into other times. He's like, dude, I was there and I got a piece of your FD, like, from that wreck. Yeah. Like, you know, I still got it. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So I was like, but I mean, luckily the K wall held up and people were all like not injured. So I was like, Jesus.
So you were in the car when it crashed. Do you remember hearing the crowd, or do you remember hearing the judges?
Yes. So I was in shock when it happened because I was like, oh my God, I was not expecting that. I thought I was just focused on just nailing a run. I didn't, but so back then we didn't even have safety meetings, the protocol to know what we would do in a crash like that. So I should have gotten out of the car. But then like, for some reason I tried starting it because the car died and I heard the crowd, but I was just focused on the car and I was like, will it start? And it started and I was like, oh, it still starts and runs. So instead of pulling into the staging area in the banking, which I should have done, I went back into the pit. So I drove back outside of the freaking wall and went back into my pit. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here, but I was like all by myself outside in the pit when everyone was in the track. So I was like, damn it. Like, so I kind of just was on my own and just, like didn't know what to do, but I was like, I'm done for the day. So ended up being a spectator after that. But
how are you feeling? Like, what kind of emotions are you going through?
I mean, I was just on this adrenaline rush to just fix the car and just make qualifying. Yeah. So for me to wreck after that, it was just like, I was in this cloud of like, I don't know what just happened. Yeah. I just totaled my car. And I was like, oh my God, this was my daily.
Was it upsetting?
I think I was upset off the first hit already that I like crunched it. I'm like, oh my God, the car is messed up already. Yeah. It was already pretty bad from the first one. And then the second one was like, okay, I really finished it off. So I was like, I mean, I was definitely sad, and like, I was pretty bummed after that. But at the end of that event, though, I got a business card thrown on my car, and it was of this shop, like, it was like, Rotary Reliability and Racing. And they're like, hey, I got an FD shell for you. So I was like, oh. So from that, like, I picked up a shell for like super cheap. I think it was a salvage title, like it was all, I don't know if it was salvage or not, but it was like a stripped down, just a rolling chassis, and it got in an accident before, but I got it for like $400.
Yo, that's crazy.
So it was like super cheap. So I was like, thank you, because I had no idea how the hell I was going to replace this car that I can't claim insurance on, or anything. It was my daily, but luckily I had a Corolla that I could still drive around at home. But I was like, damn, I just totaled my car, but luckily I got this one cheap. So.
And is that the one you have today?
That's the one I have today.
The one you have today.
And for those of you guys listening, like, I know if you drove the car off the track, then I'm sure people are thinking like, oh, could it have been that bad? And so, and to answer your question, yes. And Calvin he kind of was like awarded the Option awarded him. He was on the he's kind of famous in Japan. Option did a video. And it said Crash Kings or something like that on the cover, and it was your car up on top of the center divider, or not center divider, on top of the K-rail. Should we like crown you like Crash King, like give you a crown right here?
I know, and I was worried about that, kind of like
the publicity of that.
Yeah, like on me, because I mean, that was the one wreck that I had. I mean, I got into small wrecks earlier, but it was such a huge wreck.
You were on a special stage when that happened. Right. Yeah.
Yes. It was during competition when everything was being recorded and everyone was watching too. So that was a big thing. But there was other wrecks at that event too. Like Taniguchi crashed in the final round with Ueo.
Yeah.
When he went wide and hit the back and slammed the front. So he wrecked at the end too, but it wasn't as gnarly as a wreck as I did.
It was pretty crazy.
So, yeah, and other people crashed too at that event. But I guess I just did the biggest crash. And
that doesn't make you less of a driver, though. Like I love it. Like I mean, you were balls to the wall, like really, really, really trying hard, and your car was limping, you know, and you were still trying to make it. So
and I remember
wrong with that.
I remember when you crashed, the judges in the stand, they like got up and cheered, or like, you know, it's kind of like.
They appreciate the courage and the brazenness of it, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it was just spectacular. And like, I didn't know how that made you feel either.
Yeah. So I didn't exactly know that until probably later when I watched the video after. But I mean, I was just bummed on the car, but for me to be there was an honor. And then I did just drive hard. Like I was just fully committed, and you know, I did drove as hard as I could. And then I remember Toshi Ayama kind of like, as I was talking with him a bunch back then, and he was telling me like, you know, you could take that, you know, and, you know, either, you know, run with it and like make something bigger because you're known from that. Or, you know, like, I forget the exact words he used, but he motivated me to like use that to just keep going and pushing yourself, you know, and had a notoriety from that. And I could have stopped there and not built another car, but I pursued and just said, all right, now I'm going to build a dedicated FD now instead of converting a street one. And I had a bolt-in cage and all that. That was actually a prestigious Saito roll cage from the D1 car that I got sponsored. So I took parts off of that and rebuilt my new white car. And then Henry Chung from Motorsport Dynamics, like, you know, spent a ton of time building that. Thank you so much, Henry. You're freaking awesome. But we worked night and day for like months leading up to SEMA 2004 to make the first event for that car. So I got sponsored like a final connection kit and these D5R Speedstar wheels. So I had to kind of show that at the SEMA, at the Speeds, like Star Shield booth that was outside that, Edwin or, you know, someone that sponsored me back then. So we were grinding all through end of 03 to 2004 to make that event. But it was just a rolling chassis at that point with no engine. But we just got the body displayed and pushed it in. It was lowered and had the wheels all spaced out where the fitment was cool, and I could dump it really low where like I didn't have to worry about it driving yet. So I kind of had like this show stance on it. But I was in the offsets and, you know, wide stance back then because Japan was already doing that at that time. So I was really kind of anal on wheel fitment. And and then but Henry was awesome. Like he kind of got that car put together for that 04 SEMA. But in between that, I had my Koki S14 that I would just drift at random events too, just to kind of get some driving seat time. But it was NAKA with in and out, and Apex. Len kind of took some parts off his S14 Zenki and helped me kind of get that car together too. So thank you to Len and Apex and all that. And I did some drift show-offs with that, but it was just NA, so it was a little underpowered, but, you know, broke some stuff here and there, like clutch pedal fell off during that drift show-off, and he helped. I think Jensen kind of helped me kind of screw that back on, like, you know, like spot welds on that would break, and it happened during that event.
You did go on though to become part of the original Team Falken, right?
Yes.
So that's around that time. So tell us how that happened.
Yeah. So Nick approached me at the time, and they were working on building a new team for 04, and we heard that Formula D was starting the Formula Drift season in 04. So they were building a S13 chassis, and they're looking for a driver to drive. And they were debating on kind of doing a driver search for the car. But I had a close relationship with Nick at the time and with the MyFD, and, you know, I was showing up at other events that they did after that. And then I think we met JR Vonkin like at this one event in California Speedway, and I forget what event it was, but he trailered his car and spent a lot of money to kind of make it out there. So
that was a Nopi event. That was when he brought his coupe out, and it was like the off-white with the green stripe on the side. Yeah.
yes. So they did some deal with JR at that point to run his personal car for next year, but they actually built a brand new S13 with LS Auto with Kevin Wells. And then Kelvin Tohar was the car manager for that. So they kind of put together the car at LS Auto, and they ended up picking me as the driver and just didn't do the driver search. So thank you, Nick, for that. We appreciate it. And like, that was probably one of my favorite chassis that I actually drove.
You did really well in that car. And something that you didn't mention was that was one of the first like full sponsorship where you were given a ride. Like you didn't have to work, you didn't have to build the car. You just showed up and drove it.
Yeah. So I was super like privileged to, get that ride. And like, I know a lot of people were kind of figuring out different teams and what to do for the upcoming Formula Drift season. And a lot of people were using personal cars, but I didn't have a personal car, and I was trying to get the FD going, but it was just way far behind on like a brand new build at the point. So for me to get that ride, I was like, oh, thank you. Because I didn't have anything, ready to go at the beginning of 04. So I don't know if we did any testing too much at that point before that. I don't recall, but I think Atlanta 2004 Formula Day was the first time I drove it. So we were still dialing it in, and, it was that event was amazing because I was like, whoa, first pro US series, and all these guys transported their cars to the East Coast. I give you props, and you figured out your own transport to get it out there. And I was like, wow, I had Falken handle that, but to be able to do the logistics on that early on, like, that's props.
Yeah, we weren't balling it like you, Calvin. We didn't have that right. There were very few people like Calvin. Yeah, I don't know how many people had full rides like you, but it was the minority. Majority were all trying to figure it out. So
so I was super fortunate to have that, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I, ran that year, as best I could, and I think I podiumed at Sonoma round. I got third, so that was one of the early like Falken podiums of that year.
And how was it doing that like in front of your home area?
Yeah, that was amazing because that event, I brought friends over and some family people, and like that was the first time ever there was a pro event. And then that was like a super highlight of my driving career early on. And then like, but it was that event with the car it was like I ended up breaking my axles like right at like the semifinals and like the final four. And then I couldn't like right at the launch, we were using stock axles at the time. And I think we had like this more aggressive, like metallic clutch. And if I rev it up too much, it would just snap. So I broke my axles off the line. And back then, FD didn't really have all their 5-minute rules or any of that back then. And car swapping and all that. So,
and also breaking axles was a new thing that we were all experiencing because we went from grassroots to doing pro, and all of a sudden people were upping their the tire grip on the car, and so breaking axles. It was not common where everyone brings axles to the track.
Yeah, so it wasn't. So even Falken with the team, like we luckily did have some extra axles, but we didn't have, well, I don't know if we actually did at that point, but we weren't able to swap an axle at that point out. So then I had to hop in JR's car. And I never drove that S13.
That wasn't in the rule book yet, so they had to let you.
It probably changed after that, but at that point there was no rules that we could swap cars during competition. So I hopped in JR's car. And mind you, JR is freaking huge and tall as hell. And so right when I sat in the car, I felt like a little kid where I couldn't even reach the pedals. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to drive this thing? So, and I somehow got the seat up and was able to reach. And then I had to just run against like either like Samuel or Reese, like one of them. I think it was Samuel. But, so I got that run in, and then like
I just remembered that you beat me in the top 8 to get to the top 4.
Yes, we ran together in top 8. Yes,
I just remembered right now.
That's right. We were battling each other, and that was a good run that we did. Yeah. So luckily, like I think I ran against Reese in like for third place. And
which
then,
is
like,
crazy because those guys were on a tear. They were, Reese and Samuel were winning everything.
Every single
unstoppable.
Event. Yeah. And it was Samuel the first year that was just unstoppable. Like, no one could beat him, you know, and like, so he knocked me out for that. So that's why I was running for third. And then with Reese, I was like, dude, I got to charge up Reese.
You had to drive against both those guys in one event.
Yeah. And then so I ended up like, Reese went wide on that one corner. So I actually went and I think I got a pass in because he went super wide and did a half spin or something like that. And I was like, whoa, you made a mistake. So I freaking took advantage.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, luckily I was able to drive JR's car okay. But that's the magic of S chassis. Like, S chassis is a very, like, you know, easy to drift cars that had great balance, you know. So that's kind of like the basis of, like, you know, drift cars in my eyes as well. Like, you can just hop in those and just kind of drive it, you know, pretty decently, even if it's a different car.
Yeah.
But luckily I got that win and got my first podium, and that was just huge.
It's awesome.
So
yeah.
I
love that.
Yeah. And that kind of put me in a decent place in standings. And then an Irwindale round, like, I felt really confident in the car at Irwindale, and I made it pretty far as well. And then I remember running against Dai on my last tandem, and then I was just charging. I was like, I just got to stay floored through the bank and just freaking be on it. And like, felt comfortable and I was charging, but then my intercooler pipe kept blowing out.
Oh,
so
man.
like we had to do a couple of restarts, and they couldn't keep the seal on the intercooler piping. And every time I took off, it would blow out again. So I was like, damn it. So I ended up losing the run from that just because my intercooler pipe blew out. But I forget where I placed in that. But at the end of the season, I finished fourth
awesome.
in the championship.
Very good.
So that was the best I did in all of my Formula Drift days. And that S13 was just awesome. Like, I love that chassis.
Do you know what happened to that car?
So next year, 05 was the big Falken year. So they went and built a whole new fleet of cars. Well, two cars, like my G35 and JR's Mustang. So I ended up moving into the G35. That S13 went to Hubert Young. So they painted that the silver and red scallop livery with discount tire. He drove that throughout the year, but I think he ended up getting into that wreck maybe at Chicago's Soldier Field event, I believe. And then I think it totaled.
Okay.
So yeah, but we didn't see that car after that, but they had coupes that was still kind of running around, at that time. And another hatch that was a teal and blue hatch that Ryan Hampton drove. Had two FDs, like Seiko's FD, Tony Angelo's FD, Forsberg had that JDM Password S15.
Yep.
So Falken came out super strong in 05 and took on the whole DA team. And then Koguchi and Seiko was still kind of there, like demoing at Drift Show with us. So it was like kind of like a party year that year in 05 with DA. Like, Drift Alliance would get down at parties big time. Like, they would get super drunk.
We've heard.
They would get Koguchi drunk, and Koguchi would get wild. Like, I had no idea. Like, that guy is like super, like, you know, like chill, like the coolest dude ever, you know. And like, when he would get drunk, like, he gets freaking like goofy, like wild. Where
like, give us some examples.
A visual.
Like, he was at a restaurant, and then he straight up just out of nowhere. We're all just chatting, I think, waiting for a food. We didn't have food yet. And he just decided to stage dive and jump on a crowd of people, like other people that was sitting there at our table. He just drove and just jumped on somebody. And then, I mean, there was stuff leading up to that that other people were doing, but I was like, what the hell? That's hella crazy. Like, you know, Koguchi, like, he had like this fun side of him that was just awesome. Like, he was super chill and like collected and like, you know,
he's always too cool. He always looked too cool.
Yeah, but he did it in a natural way where he wasn't trying. That's just him, you know, like, he was awesome. And he was always kind of showing us how to drive, and we did Pikes Peak with him, and he was like freaking manging all the straights and like drifting all the corners, and like, you know, we kind of did certain corners here and there, but he was just freaking on it, like manging everywhere, connecting all the turns. And he even like went off one time, was laughing about it. He's like, I went off in the dirt, had 3 wheels up, and like, you know, stayed on it and powered back on. So he was just laughing at that moment. And I was like, holy smokes, and it just went off the cliff. But yeah, Koguchi was awesome. Like kind of hanging out with him and in the background, like he was actually a fun like guy, and he would get drunk and get down. Like he was hilarious. So Seigo was more chill, but Koguchi he'll get wild. He was a fun guy.
I love it. You mentioned G35, which is kind of it's kind of an oddball car. So tell us like how that came about. You were in the Falken G35. You kind of made some history with that car with Falken. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there was a point where I think Roman was actually the car manager at that point at that time with Falken, and he contacted me and was debating between a 350Z and a G35. Before that, I actually drove I drove the Motor X 350Z just for a couple of events, before that. So I had some familiarity with the 350Z. But for me, coming off of like having different cars in the past, like the funky Avenger and then FD and all that, like where I kind of knew that a different car would actually help stand out. And then knowing that I think Forsberg had his Z already, I didn't really kind of want to run another chassis that someone else had. So I picked G35 to kind of be more different. And then I thought the long wheelbase would help and be a little bit more stable in drift, where you can kind of be on it more and have kind of more like that Nomoken like style where you could just stay on it and be super smoky, and there's a long wheelbase stable drift. Realized that the chassis was a little bit longer and heavier to be super competitive, but off the bat it was impressive because I think 05, like Gary built a good strong motor setup. So we're kind of the early guys to use that VK VQ, and then did pistons and rods and built the actual bottom end. Gretty actually sponsored the twin turbo kit that they had. And it was like their kind of off the shelf kit and all that. But like we work with AEM to kind of get the tuning in. So like, we kind of had that car like making, I think like 450 wheel at the beginning of 05, and 450 at 05 was a pretty strong setup.
Yeah.
So most guys were still running SR20s at the time, which, mid 300s. So it was one of the stronger cars besides Samuel's Viper and, and Reese's LS car. But even I think it was comparable to Reese's LS because that was an NA setup that they did. So the long wheelbase actually made it very stable, and I could stay on it like pinned, and it would just throw up a bunch of smoke. So the Atlanta round, I was able to kind of like run it clean and be floored coming on the downhill, and it would throw up a bunch of smoke on that downhill section. So I ended up getting number 1 qualifier in Atlanta round in that G35. And then later on that year in Sonoma, this is still back when we were doing a faint entry on doing that, so I was familiar with that, and I was able to kind of battle a bunch of Falken guys at the time. Like I ran against Forsberg and JR, and then like and I think did I run Reese in the final? I ran Tanner in the finals. I forget what happened with Reese and Tanner, Reese and Samuel that event, but I ran Tanner in the finals. And then Tanner messed up and went onto that island and went wide. So I was able to actually pass him because he went way off line, and then ended up securing the win in that event. And I was like, Tanner was new at the time. He was running the McKinney S13, but he showed a charger.
He showed a lot of promise for how inexperienced he was.
Yeah, but he was the new guy because we all ran in 04 first. He wasn't running an 04, right. And I was like, who's this new guy coming in trying to show us what's up? And then like, so I was like, we've kind of been here. Like, I want to be the first import car win. Like Tanner's new. Like that guy doesn't deserve it. So I just went hard and drove as hard as I could, but he was such a freaking good driver. Yeah. And then he just happened to mess up, and I took advantage of that and got the win there. So, and JR podium and got third then. So that was a huge moment for Falken because that was Falken's actually first professional drift car win, I think. So I don't think anyone in Japan, Koguchi didn't get a win at that time. He was the main Falken driver in Japan. So Falken made a big deal out of it, where they ended up shipping the G35 to Japan for Tokyo Auto Salon in 2006 and flew me over there. And they had a whole kind of stage. It was on their main stage, and then they had a whole agenda for me to kind of do stage shows there, which was kind of awkward for me. But
what kind of stage show? Like dancing?
They had a bunch of these dancers that would do dancing things, and I wouldn't dance. But then like they would bring me in between those acts, and then I did interviews up there. And there was like one of the like Drift Tengoku host that spoke a little English as well. He would always wear this yellow vest, and I think he spoke a little bit of English, so I was able to converse with him. And like I think his name was Bomber, his nickname. And then so we did interviews there, and then other shows was like Rochambeau with the crowd and give out like prizes to the crowd. And I think they call like Jinkansen or something like that. And I would have to learn that there, and I would do that. And I was like, oh my God, this is so awkward. Like, like, I don't know. I'm not as like outgoing to kind of be on a stage like that. But I just did what I was told, and it was just a huge honor. And then like, I remember like, I met Kumakubo, and all that from earlier, and he came up and we're, chatting, and I was like, he was like, oh wow, you kind of had a big thing up there. And I was just kind of like embarrassed that I was up there like that. But I'm like, I'm not as good as you guys down here, and you guys didn't have a stage show, but I was just honored to kind of be a part of that. And like, I guess it was a big deal because Falken hasn't won a pro event, and the G35 did. So I was glad I was able to do that for Falken. And kind of get a win kind of during the 05 year.
So speaking of Kumakubo, I know that you had an S14 and you were driving at Ebisu in Japan. So tell us how that happened. Yeah,
so back in 05, when I won the Formula D event, I got prize money. It was like $5,000 at a time. So Antonio Alvendia, like he was been close with Team Orange and Kumakubo, and like he's kind of done some stuff in Japan kind of earlier ahead of that, but he kind of introduced me to them. And then we set up a trip in 05 to go to Ebisu. So Kumakubo had like, there was a practice S14, a Zenki that was kind of like a boost up setup where it was SR stock turbo, but just like higher boost setup with a, ECU tune for it. Coilovers, just kind of basic setup, oil cooler, so it was reliable. But they had a car available. And then I was like, cool, like I'm down for anything. And then, so he sold it to me for that $5,000, and I was able to get that car, and like we coordinated a trip with Antonio, and then Robbie Nishida like super helped out because I met up with him, and then he actually drove all the way from like his, he lives near Tokyo area outside of that, near like the Yokota Air Force Base that he worked at. And he drove me up to Ebisu and Fukushima, and I was like hours away. So I'm like, thank you, Robbie. Like I would have no idea how to get there on my own back then. So he kind of brought me up, and we hung out up there for that day. And then he ended up driving home. But like I stayed up there, and they kind of took me on, and like I got to stay at this mechanic Ibu's house. Like they were just down with US, drifting, and then, Kumakubo was trying to learn English and all that. So like he took me on, and like, he took care of me, and I'm so fortunate and thankful for that, because he kind of, I was sponsored with Falken at the time, so I was able to get tires, and I bought the car that he had, and then they had a lot of storage around the track. Mm-hmm. So they kind of reserved a spot for me to park that car. So they took care of that car for like a good amount of years, like, for me, like, so I got it in like 05, and then, ended up selling it in 09. So it was a good 4 years they held on to it. Then I did 3 separate FEC trips, and each time I would go out there, it would be like 2 weeks at a time. Falken Japan, like, I had a connection with from Tokyo Auto Salon, and like, they gave me a set of tires, like a bunch of tires for me to run at Ebisu. And then Antonio was there, and on that first trip, and we on various trips, actually the last other trips too. But he shot some photos of it and all that when I was out there. And they were Ebisu in Japan was a lot different than how tracks are run here. They're so much more low key and chill, where you just pay like an entry fee at the bottom on the entrance, and you can get access to any track like that didn't have an organized event going on. So they had a listing of like all these tracks, and they had 7 tracks there. It was like north, south, east, west, and then like school course, driftland, and tollgate course. So every one of those were like open. There wasn't any like gatekeepers like guarding it. Like if you just couldn't access anything that had like an organized event that they booked up for a day.
Yep.
You could drive around the whole thing on your own and just run at a track that was open. And I was like, that was the most amazing thing ever.
How much was it to get in?
It was really affordable compared to what you would think it is. And I don't remember the translation, and Kumakubo kind of hooked me up at that time too. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, they really took care of me at that time. And I went by myself. Robbie kind of came out the first day and hung out, but he had to work, so he had to go back home. And he came at the very end of that trip, 2 weeks, at the end of the 2 weeks, to come pick me up. And then we hung out that day too. So I was on my own by myself that first trip. And then, so it was like a playground. I went to like every single track and just kind of just learned the courses on my own. And like right-hand drive was still kind of funky to me, but so I had to learn that, like, get used to that. But, you know, North course was super fun. And then West course was big, like road course event. So usually that's where the office is, and usually don't get to drift that too much, but there was times where there was an event, so I was able to hop on that and drift like that big fast track. And that's like Drift Bible track where KG did like the race drift, session. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on the same track as that. Like, it was freaking amazing. And then South course is like intimidating because like the front straight, it's actually not a jump, it's a drop. So you see cars jump, but there actually is a big drop right at that inner apex. So you kind of like drop into that straightaway, and then there's that pit wall, and then that big sweeper that at the time like was a little rougher and had more dirt and all that, and less pavement, so it's easy to go off and all that. But my car didn't have enough to connect the straightaway, so I would like drift into it, straighten, and then initiate again, like kind of like the old school style, like the old school way.
Under 400 horsepower, forget it.
yeah.
How much horsepower did that car have?
So stock turbo and just with like a bar of boost. So like it was probably, it wasn't that much. So in the 200s, but it was perfect for like a practice setup. So it was reliable during the whole time. And Kumakubo would come out at certain courses and would, give me input on my driving and how Japanese driving was, and theories on how you tandem and how you use your e-brake on how they do, because Kumakubo was like the chase tandem master.
Yeah, he was.
He was just incredible chasing, and he knew that was the primary focus he wanted, because that's how you win tandem events and win events. Yeah. Like if you can close in and lock on and get good proximity on people, that's how you win tandem events. So that's why when they do demos, he was always the second driver and always had Tanaka lead, but he would follow and get all that tandem chase practice.
Yeah. And just to give some context on your story, when you were there in 2006, that was around peak Team Orange time when they had the most exciting tandem driving or tandem battles in in D1, right? So like anytime you saw Tanaka compete or Kumakubo, like you knew you were going to see something really good, because they were so aggressive following, and they just had a really good technique to it. And you mentioned something about handbrake, and I wanted to ask you kind of what he said, because I know that for some of my friends that are really nerdy about Japanese drifting or have been there, something that I've realized or seen or heard is that in Japan, when they were using the e-brake, they wanted to use the e-brake in a way that it didn't lock the tires from the outside where you could see it. They wanted to use it. I mean, sometimes you do, but sometimes there's also modulating. You just want to slow down the tires just a little bit, like kind of like a foot brake. You want to. It's not just on or off. But did he kind of talk about that at all, or what did he tell you?
Yeah, so his explanation of how you use e-brake is he used it so that when you're in drift, when you pull the e-brake, that actually squats the rear suspension and loads it up. And when you release it, it's already loaded, and you get back on the gas. It's already compressed, and you could actually launch out.
Interesting.
And that was his technique on, like, he was saying very few, even D1 drivers at the time, were able to figure out how to gain acceleration in drift. Yeah. And part of it was using the e-brake mid-drift to not necessarily like adjust for angle. It's more to like set the car to like, you know, hold your angle, but be able to load it up and get ready to accelerate and gain acceleration after releasing.
That Nopi event that you talked about earlier, the one where JR brought his car, and Nadine and I got to ride with Team Orange. I was in the car with Tanaka, I think, and you were with Kumakubo, and we felt that like right away. They were very aggressive with loading up the weight on the rear, and like you felt the car jump forward every single time they did it.
Yeah, and they had that technique down, and they said a lot of US guys would just tend to like floor it right off the bat, and just create a lot of smoke. But then you actually need that drag racing mentality where you're actually thinking about the rear wheels, you're steering with the rear wheels, and when you apply throttle, you're actually gaining acceleration and like feeling the grip and rolling on the throttle instead of just pinning it right off the bat, because then you're gonna slip the tires right away off the bat. So you want it to kind of gain traction as you're accelerating.
Right.
So he was kind of, you know, I did that at first and just stomped on it a little too much, and he was telling me to back off a bit. And then roll on the acceleration, kind of feel the grip accelerate the car.
Right.
So they had some specific techniques that they use in Japan that was very enlightening, and like, you know, I couldn't communicate like, you know, extensively, but I got certain tidbits of them on how to do that, and then like the vision that you should be having when you kind of tandem. But it was amazing seeing them drive. I got to hop in like their cars, like, so when I went, they were kind of first building their GDB Subarus. So Kumakubo had his car first, and that was up and running with the Hollinger setup. I rode in his car in that soft course, and it was freaking fast as hell. And he would like...
That was the June Auto build, or was...
Yes.
That was, right? Yeah.
So the June Auto build in the championship Subaru that he had. He won the championship in that one. And then he would shift. The Hollinger had such short gear ratios. He would shift so much and get up to fifth gear on the straightaway. And I was like, Jesus, like you're freaking shifting like a lot.
Yeah.
And just to kind of keep the wheel speed up.
Yeah.
And then that would kind of help with the smoke. And then it was just really short. So I was like amazed on how often he shifted to keep the power band going, because it's still 4-cylinder, big turbo. So you kind of have to keep it up top. And then Tanaka had just got his GDB going, where like it was his first test day when I went there. And I was like, whoa, I'm going to see how you first get into the car. And like he never drove it. Tex Modify was the one that built that one.
Yeah. And
he hopped in it the first time, and he drifted it like it was freaking like he had this car for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, like J guys be knowing how to dial their cars in like off the bat. I'm like, whoa. Yeah. Usually your first build is like you gotta like freaking, it's all weird, and you gotta do a lot of setup before you get there. But they were there off the bat.
Yeah.
I was like,
let me do some donuts first, some figure eights. Let me feel out the car. No, let's just send it to Ebisu South Course.
Yeah, South Course, first test day, and just lining the walls, first corner. I'm like, wow, like, geez, like, you know, they're like way advanced on that, you know, knowledge of tuning and driving level. So I was just like, you know, like, geez, okay, you guys are freaking masters.
Yeah.
So I was like, whoa, because I was there for 2 weeks at a time, and some of the different trips are kind of getting mixed up on my head on which years it was, but I went 3 times. And so lots of memorable events. The last one in 2009, I ended up, they had another driver that was a girl. Her name was Sumika. And then she had a 180 that was yellow before, and then they were kind of making her like, you know, down with Team Orange, and they were training her every day there. And then like they brought her and my car to a D1 Divisional East round. And it was out on Maze circuit. So like that team orange green double decker like transporter. They loaded my car and Sumika's car up there, and I was like, whoa, I'm on this freaking team orange transporter. That was crazy. And then so they brought it to Maze circuit, and I competed at a D1. It was a divisional E, so it wasn't a pro level. It was kind of like street level, like street legal kind of style event. and I didn't fix up my car at all. Still, it was still that stock turbo boost up setup by like mid low 200. So I was kind of underpowered out there. But luckily, it actually rained. So and I drove in every suit when it was raining because it would rain in Japan a bunch. So I was like, cool, I have a little more power in the rain because that didn't matter as much. So the way they ran qualifying was way different than US. They do 15-minute sessions and you just do laps.
Okay.
No one stopped you and go. It was just you do a 15-minute lap and they're just watching you.
A bunch of drivers out all at the same time?
Yeah. So they had different groups because there was probably 60, 70 cars there. Okay. So they had group A, group B, group C, and they kind of grouped up cars not in particular orders, but just, you had your number and then your numbers from this number to number would go out in their session, and it was a 15-minute session and another number. So they had practice like that first, and then they ran qualifying like that. So qualifying was you just did a bunch of laps.
Oh,
it wasn't 3 set laps where you stop and start. It was just laps. So you could get a bunch of runs in, and then they were just judging you on watching the whole session.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, dang, you guys get way more seat time than US.
Yeah, for sure.
Why don't you do that?
That's hard. I did that. We did that for a final bout. Was it final bout? I'm not sure. Yeah, it was for a final bout. And for the judges, that's really hard because you're just watching, and you have to watch every single one.
Notes.
You have to take lots of notes because some guys might nail it on one run and then do poorly on another run, and so it's just a lot of work. It's great for the driver, and it's you need a really good judge to judge that kind of format.
Yeah. So I guess that's how they run it, because I was the one and only time I experienced a competition in Japan. And then, but I ended up getting 17th in qualifying, and I almost made top 16 by 1. So I was that was pretty cool just to even get there, because I was in a super low power car, and there was some sponsored GP Sports Gallery people that were had fully hooked up street legal cars. I was like, oh, you're running big power setups,
Yeah.
So I didn't even have I was running a stock turbo. These guys all had big turbos, and I don't know if the motors were built, but it was probably big, boosted setups that were, street legal level. So
you were just a visitor, you were there 2 weeks at a time. How could you even collect yourself to go compete? That's crazy.
Right. And that's the first time on that track. I'd never been there. So I was
I love that you're so humble with your experience. I mean, you were kind of amazed that your car was on the Team Orange transport. You're really appreciative of all the support and advice that you were given and the opportunities you were given. And, at that point in 2009, you were a 6-year veteran of Formula D. You've been on the podium. You've accomplished so much. And for, the fact that you are still appreciative of those things, that shows a lot about who you are.
I know why he got all those things, because you're a nice guy. Yeah. Calvin's the nice guy. And I'm gonna change gears, because I'm gonna tell you another story about Calvin being a nice guy as it relates to my car. And he was very involved with my car. His car and my car kissed.
Yeah,
it's really funny.
Too hard,
a little too hard.
Hard kiss,
a smashing,
oh God, our car smashed. Our car smashed, but not like that. Oh my God. I want Benson to lead the story, and then Calvin's gonna give his side. And
okay,
it's a funny story. It's funny to me.
Yeah. So there was a yearly event in Lancaster, and there was it was called something fairgrounds out there, right?
Lancaster Fairgrounds.
Yeah,
It might
was
be.
like
Rim of the
yeah,
World.
the Rim of the World. Like they made like a one-off first annual like drift competition at
Yeah.
Rim of the World's parking lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think later on there were demos and stuff, but they decided to do a competition in 2006. And what it was
2005.
Was it 2005?
I think it was 06. I actually just saw the trophy and I was like, oh, 06. I got a date for it.
Okay. Oh, you just ruined the story.
Sorry.
No, just kidding.
Wow.
So 2006, right? I think there was demos. There was a lot of drifting going on. So I think there were some demos.
We were demoing earlier in the day.
I think you were doing some tandem stuff with Reiko.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was
Team Drifting Pretty.
And then I was just doing was I doing demos in my car? I don't remember. It's hazy. It was a long time ago. But I wanted to compete, but I had my car. They wouldn't let me compete because I didn't have a proper roll cage.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, they were.
He just wanted to drive my car.
They were kind of strict on the roll cage. I think I had a Cusco, and they're like, no, you need something like crazier, right? Like a
Gary Castillo cage,
like a Gary Castillo
mine.
cage, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it had to have door beams and
had
stuff.
Had a name drop, you know.
And so
Gary's the man.
So yeah, Gary's the man. But so, babe, you let me drive your car, and I was like,
babe.
And I was like, I don't know if I want to compete in your car just because I know it's your baby, and you know. Competing, there's always the risk of something happening when you're competing in a car, whether it's yours or someone, especially if it's someone else's, right? Because you're also not familiar with the car. And so you let me drive your car, and you said it's okay. Why don't you tell me what you said?
I said it was okay because I was gonna do a color change anyway because I was just coming off my FD season, and it was red, and I love the livery, but it was just I was gonna go bling bling and go pink, so it was like right in that transition stage. I was getting our car ready for our wedding. You know that? We got married later that year in September. And I was like, I'm going to have my car at our wedding. It's going to be pink. So I was going to do it anyway. So this was the last. Did
you also have the S15
yeah, I had that stuff
planned?
Yeah.
You were ready to do that too.
But so it's kind of ironic what happened.
So I knew that. Yep. And so that's why. Just kidding.
Shut up.
So we're competing.
Makes me feel better.
You don't have to feel bad about any of it. No.
Yeah. So we were competing, and I qualified in your car.
Yeah.
And I battled either Taka or Hiro in top 16, and I won that one. And then in top 8, I battled the other one. Taka
or Hiro.
Taka or Hiro, and I won that one. And then it was me and Calvin in the top 4. You remember that, Calvin?
Yes, we remember that.
Yeah.
So
I'll let you take it now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you were running pretty strong during that time too, and I was like, oh, that's in Nadine's car too. So
yeah, because my car.
It was nice because also Nadine's car's always been faster than mine. My car was a lot like your S14. It just had an intercooler and a boost controller, and really that was it. So to be in Nadine's car a little bit faster was nice.
Oh, that's cool. So, okay, and there you go. You know, a more proper car.
Yeah.
That was more competitive. I was like, oh, Benson's driving strong at this event. So, knowing that, because I saw some of your tandems earlier and you're doing good, I kind of knew, like, I had to stay close on you to kind of be able to hang and, like, you know, drive good. I think I did a lead run first and just kind of ran my line and I, you know, kind of ran my lead. And then at the, on the switch when we're running tandem, I was just like, all right, I got to stay on you because you're kind of strong. So we ran that first corner.
One more time.
Oh yes, we did it one more time. That's right. Forget what happened on that.
I can't remember either, but yeah, I remember I was driving well and you were driving well. And that first run, I didn't really know what to expect, and you were on me. I was like, okay, I gotta get back. Like I gotta make up for it, right? And so it was pretty good for both of us, so we had it one more time.
Okay, cool, yeah. So, so I remember I just had to stay on you because, we were battling on it one more time, so then you kind of push it a little more. So on my chase run, we ran that first corner and then into that transition, and then I think on the final corner, that right-hander, I was getting ready to like accelerate out of the corner, and then you kind of, I think, had like a half spin, or you just had a lot of angle and you slowed down a bunch right at the final, the finish. So right at that point, like I was like, oh crap! Like I was just getting on the gas, so I was already lunging forward, and then I had to like e-brake and try to stop, and I just couldn't stop in time because I was kind of a little close in proximity on you. And I think I nailed like your front wheel,
you know what's funny?
fender, wheel.
Uh-oh.
You know what's funny,
Uh-oh.
Calvin, is I think you felt so bad about what happened. I think you reversed it in your memory because you were the one, I was the one chasing, and then exactly what happened, I was the one that hit you.
Oh, was it that way?
So it was all Benson's fault.
Yeah, because I
Oh.
smashed the front of Nadine's car into your
Door.
your
I think it
door
was
and
the
door and
door.
front fender maybe.
Right. Okay.
So what happened was so there's the long sweeper into like a hairpin. So
Yeah.
we made it through the sweeper, and then you were throttling out of the hairpin, and my thought was like, oh, like this part I can get close to Calvin because like it was an easy corner, right? And so I kind of was not checking you, and then you kind of like you did that half spin.
So
I was not
right.
I was not expecting that to happen there.
Yeah.
And I went like pedal to the floor, like right into your car.
Right. That's right. Okay. Yes, it was backwards in my head for some reason.
Yeah.
So I felt bad for doing
did.
that half spin because I screwed up. And then, so then we had to fix our cars.
Yeah, we had to fix our cars.
Keep going
and
with the story.
We had to fix our cars. And just like when we were competing at Sonoma, when, I conceded the run to you, right? And like when I crashed Nadine's car to your car, I felt so bad. And like all I could think about was how bad I felt for Nadine, for what I did to Nadine's car.
Yeah.
And like I wasn't even thinking about trying to like piece the car back together and keep competing because they didn't announce who won between you and me.
Yeah.
And then but you were like right when you crashed, like you were in pro mode and you were like, we gotta fix the car, we gotta keep going. And I didn't even work on the car. I wasn't even trying to work on the car. And then you kept going. So you moved on.
Yeah.
And then how did you finish? You won that one, right?
Won.
So I ended up winning. Like Dan Pino was competing in that event with his Mustang Drift Patrol. So we went down together.
Drift Patrol!
NorCal. So he helped me wrench on the car because there was some stuff bent that they could get fixed.
We bent some of your suspension, I think.
Yeah. So we had to kind of get that together and it's jammed on it and got it going. And then we faced Tanner in the finals. So, and Tanner was kind of testing his 350Z.
That's right.
With AEM at that time. And that was kind of before Formula E started, like when he ran that car, I think. So it was an early test day for him.
Yeah.
But it was Tanner, so we're like, oh, I got to go hard on Tanner. This guy's freaking good.
Yeah.
So, but I ended up running like really close with him and ran clean on both lead and follow, and he was still new with that car, so I ended up getting the win from that. So I was like, cool, like it was all really eventful leading up to that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how my car was going to handle after the wreck either, but I just had that same mentality, like, dude, just go. Like, it's already messed up, just charge it. Whatever happens. So luckily it still held up okay, and I drove it well enough to get the win.
That was awesome.
So that was cool.
And then after the win, you walked up to me and you told me like sorry, like it was your fault or something, and like you wanted to help me pay to fix her car. And I was like, no, I don't want any money. And you were insisting, and you're like, I have like I don't remember, like you had some money on you that you're like, please take this. And we took it and it went into like fixing her car, and that was like so nice of you. You didn't even have to do that.
Yeah, like I felt bad because I knew that I saw Nadine's face, and she was like super bummed and pissed that her car was messed up, and I knew how much she cared about it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, damn, my bad. Like, it was me kind of messing up. And then, like, you know, I had like just a little bit of cash at the time, and I was like, what, here, dude, just take this to fix your car. Cause I felt bad. Like, I felt like I screwed up and caused that, so I don't know. Like, back then it was still kind of like drifting mentality, where it's like everyone took care of their cars, but, like, if you cause something, it's kind of like you can help out if you can, just for like nice common courtesy, but
like you said, anytime we were on the track together, there was that common agreement. Like, if I don't know, it was spoken, but if something happens to your car during tandem, you're responsible for your own car. That was kind of the code back then, and so for you to offer me money, we really appreciated that.
Yeah, that was so sweet. I think I was in shock that day because I was like, oh damn, I said it. And then it really happened. And, just to see the car like that, I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So I wasn't mad at you. I was just like, oh snap. Like, it was kind of caught me off guard. But that was so sweet of you. And thank you so much. And that was so much water under the bridge. Like, looking back, like it's funny and sweet to me now, but probably the day of.
It was
stung.
It was a really high and a really low, because people were walking up to me saying like, I didn't know you can drive like that. And that was a little bit offensive to me, because I was like, I can drive better than this, but people were complimenting me on like how I was driving. And then when that happened, I was just like, oh wow, that changed really fast.
Yeah.
Good story. Good story.
Yeah.
But thank you. That was really sweet. It just shows like what a nice person you are, Calvin. Like, for sure. Like, all the good things happen to Calvin. It's like he's a nice guy.
Yep.
So the nicest guy in drifting and the Crash King. You got multiple
some
crowns
titles
right here. And you and I are also kindred spirits because you were a Fast and the Furious stunt driver. So tell us real quick about that, because that's kind of fun.
Yeah, so that was crazy because we kind of were on the sets on different times, so we didn't get to like hang out or anything. But I got brought on this one scene where Neela was drifting our RX-8 in the mountains.
Okay. So I'm Neela. I'm Neela. So
you were their double.
I'm Neela.
But I was working with like the second unit team, and so real Neela, and then this. So who was? I think Reese was like the acting Neela at that time. so
I was
Reese
Neela's
had like a
hands.
wig.
I was Neela's hands and feet, and then Reese was her body.
Her face.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So Reese was driving the RX-8, and then Samuel was driving like multiple cars at that time. I don't think that Mustang was there, the green Mustang at that scene, but he was driving something else. Rich Rutherford was driving like one of the chasers. Alex Pfeiffer was there, and there was like a Golf like R32 that was converted to rear drive that he drove a bit, and then Tony Obrafia-Hapa drove like that.
Oh wow.
That Bow Wow funky car,
the
end of that or something. But like, there was 5 of us, and then I was driving like this S15. So like I think it had some Shogun Performance stickers on the side or something. And then that was the one and only car. There was no backup. Some of the other cars had backups because they usually want to have a backup in a main car. But I drove, and it was all shot like outside Dodger Stadium, like I think Griffin Park. It was like a fire access road there, and it was narrow where like 2 cars could barely fit next to each other. And they had a water truck, and we shot all at night. So like right at sunset, we started shooting, and we shot till sunrise. And like they had a water truck that wet the road, and it was 5 corners, and each corner was progressively longer. So a straightaway that we had to link. And then there was a whole like helicopter camera that would pan for the wide shots, and then we would follow like camera trucks, and then they had other like rigs that would shoot other overheads. It was a huge production, and then that was my first time ever on a set like that. Like Reese brought me on because at that time in 2005 when we shot, I won Sonoma, so I actually was second in the championship after that win. So, and we kind of shot like they were picking like people that were the top drivers at the time that Reese kind of handpicked. It was Tanner, Samuel, Alex, and me. And we were brought on as like the stunt drivers at the time didn't know how to drift properly. So he brought us on to drift certain scenes that needed more drivers. And then
to drift like drift guys and not drift like what we were used to seeing on screen, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because stunt guys back then would just do like fishtails, like
fishtails, power slides,
exits of corners, and they wouldn't know how to link and connect and all that, and not know how to tandem. So we were doing like 5-car tandems up and down this mountain, and we ran it all night, like tons of runs. It was probably there was only like 1 or 2 instances where we spun out and, maybe someone did like a light tap, but for the most part, we all drove pretty clean, like all night. But it was like a curb to a drop off and then the mountainside on the side. So it was kind of sketchy.
Dang. Yeah. And you had no backup car.
No backup car, a right-hand drive car.
What position were you in the train?
So we kind of swapped different positions a bunch. I was in the back on one, I led on one, and behind like the camera was the lead car on the camera when I was following a camera truck at one point. And then I hopped in and drove the Falken FD for a couple of overhead shots too.
So dope.
And that was Sego's FD.
That
was right-hand drive with the SR. And then that car was funky because, like SR, with like the low end and you have to keep the boost up to kind of keep the power band and, like still right-hand drive and FDs are like twitchy.
Yeah.
So that was a little tricky, but I was able to drift that okay. And then the S15 was all stock for the most part, but it had these huge 275, like I think even 19-inch rims on it. And I was like, yo, this is like way too much tire for this engine setup that's like stock.
Were they not setting up the cars to make it easier to shoot?
So they were just picking cars. Like, I don't know who the car coordinator was, but they were grabbing cars that were from, people in the scene that, like, I think they had like an audition and they picked certain cars that they wanted, and those cars were selected for certain scenes. And then, but that S15 was like low on power with freaking huge tires.
Yeah.
And so, but luckily they wet the road down.
Yeah.
So I was like, cool. So then I could actually drift. And then we'll have to e-brake a lot in the center sections just to kind of extend the drifts to link all 5 corners. But we shot up and down that all night. And we would kind of trade cars, at certain points as well. But that was fun. Like we were there 2 different nights and shooting that scene.
So
Nadine, you had a scene in there you were saying too, right?
Yeah. I'm just Neela's hands and feet, shifting and driving
steering,
and stuff. Yeah, because they can't have Reese's ugly hands in there. It's Neela.
Yeah.
It's not a good look.
Definitely awkward.
Wait, was Reese wearing the costume? Please say yes.
He had a wig on.
Oh, sick.
Is he wearing a skirt? All that?
No, because it was just like, whatever you could see through the window. So it was just a wig and then whatever colored shirt that would match whatever that they were shooting at that time. So
you should have taken a picture of that.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like forgetting in 05 what kind of camera or phone we had. I was like, damn, where are the pictures? Because I snuck in some behind the scenes stuff, but I don't remember where I put those photos, and I got to dig those out somewhere.
Find them. Well, we can at least screenshot that scene, the helicopter scene that you weren't in, but
airplane shot.
Yeah, that's dope.
So let's bring it back towards the end of your FD career. You started to drive your FD again.
Yes. So for the 08 season, I was supposed to actually initially drive a 350Z convertible that Nissan sponsored, and then Falken got it all prepped to display at SEMA in 2007. They had my name on it, and then it was just like a display car with no engine at that point. But I was supposed to drive that convertible Falken livery 350Z convertible for 08. But it was a Nissan program. They wanted to run like the VK engine series at that time. And then like they were working with Hasselgren, and the power band on that Daytona prototype Nissan motor was really high, and they wanted to have more power band down low. So it was more suitable for drifting. So, not sure on all the logistics that happened, but Hasselgren wasn't able to kind of re-engineer that engine to get that done in time. And then I was using my FD as a backup initially. until that Z was ready. So I went to the first round of Long Beach with it all white. And then Atlanta round, they're saying that like that Z won't be ready yet. You're going to need to run your car for a bit longer. So I wrapped it all in Falken livery. So that Atlanta round was the first time that my car had the full Falken livery on. And it was like that, for the rest of the season. So that car, the Z, ended up like, not getting finished that year.
Yeah.
And they decided to go a different route with the engine program. And then I think, like ASD came on board and kind of built that car instead for Tyler McQuarrie the next year instead. And then they went away with the Nissan program. They built some race LS based type engine instead.
What was that like, driving your own car in Falken livery? I mean, I think maybe what a lot of people don't realize was that a lot of the Falken livery cars were personal cars. I mean, throughout the years, right? It seems from the outside, it seems very prestigious, and that you're given like a works car, but like behind the scenes, a little bit, like you kind of see that it wasn't really like that all the time.
Yeah. So I was kind of caught off guard. I didn't really have my car prepared to be a FD competition car. It was always a backup car that I did demos in.
Yeah.
So my motor was the same motor that came off my old red FD from D1, which was a stock motor, but it was actually a 99 or 2000 motor.
Cool.
From a clip that I bought. I blew up the original motor on a skid pad thing. And so I had a 2000 spec motor, but still stock, unported. And then I ran the Apex, at that time, like the AX 7582, the smaller turbine, but it was still their top IHI kind of turbo that came off of what the 03 Apex car ran. Okay. So it was the same turbo off of that Len and Jensen kind of put together. And I ran that turbo on my setup.
That was from the US car?
From the US Apex car. So the straight up same turbo off that car, because they upgraded to a RX6 turbo. Yeah. And then so I ran their old that 7582 turbo with the stock motor, because that's what Apex ran in 03, and they won the championship in Japan with that stock engine, that turbo setup. So I had that the whole time, but it was making maybe 380 something at the wheel with that. So it wasn't a ton of power. And then in 08, people kind of stepped up the power game. Yeah. They were a lot more. They were kind of pushing 500, 600, 700, around that time. Not sure exactly. Probably more like 500 or so at that time. Yeah. So so it was a bit under power, but I ran with it for probably 4 rounds. And then I was like, at some point I need to upgrade the motor, because if I'm going to compete for the rest of the year, I need to kind of be at a higher power level so I can compete. Yeah. So
were they helping you out? Was Falken helping you out with funding or sourcing parts? Since you were rocking the Falken livery, right? It was really your personal car.
Yeah. So at that time I ran it with how I had it initially the first couple rounds, but then they had Race Tune or Garage Boso at the time with Frank. So Frank was actually working on my car, and he was a crew chief, and refreshed it before that.
So you weren't doing all this in your own garage.
Yeah, so Frank maintained it. So he and Ross Petty, he was running his own program, and Frank helped build that S15 that he ran during that time too. But Frank was the main one working on my car, and then it was stored and maintained at Garage Boso in Gardena, and then he kind of did some minor upgrades, but ran the same setup pretty much the whole time until right before Sonoma round. I had another motor built. So Dave Gibson, that used to run Speed Machine in San Diego, that was a hardcore rotary guy. That guy worked with ASD, with Ian Stewart in North Carolina, and he built me another motor. So I had another motor I shipped out to him. He race ported it and assembled it and shipped it back to me. So Frank dropped it in before the Sonoma round. And at that point, I had some body damage from Seattle. So I switched it from the C-West version 2 kit to the Vertex Aero. And the Vertex Aero I actually got off the Apex original car too. And I used that aero, wrapped it in a Falken livery, and had the new motor. So last 2 rounds I ran with a stronger motor setup. But I had to do a lot of the work with the graphics side because I had to wrap it and do the new aero. So I kept the car up on my side and did all that. And I was still scrambling to get the graphics in at the event and all that. So like I didn't do as well as I liked with the new motor setup. And it was kind of tougher maintaining the car because it wasn't always at Garage Bolso. And then when it was with me, I did kind of some work on it too. And I had to get the car to transport to Falken's rig, and Falken sometimes picked it up at my parents' house's garage where I kept the car at. And then like that whole rig in the SF freaking neighborhood was crazy. And then I would load it up there and they would ship it to an event. So like, so that was kind of like
it's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work that season. And then I did some other events with it, like a Redline Time Attack that did like a drift class Time Attack, and then a drift demo, and then it was drift class that ran. So I ran that solo all by myself, and I ran into issues during an event, and I wrenched on it and drove, and then switched from a grip setup and did a Time Attack and won the drift class in it, and then I switched it to a drift setup, and it was more like Tiger Steiger, just suspension dampening changes, and then did drift demos in it as well, all through the big Willow course section and all that. So I would go to events solo, all Falken livery with my open trailer, like freaking transporting this Falken scheme car all through San Francisco to freaking SoCal. And just run events all by myself a lot because I wanted to get extra seat time, and then there was events that would come up that I needed to be at. So a lot of it was solo, and then at the big events, Falken transported it to those events in the rig.
And something I didn't realize until we started talking before this interview was like your FD, you know, it's white, it's red, Falken livery, then white, and when it was white, you also like you had the Vertex arrow, and you had the Apex sticker, and then you were mentioning Sego's car with the SR in Falken livery. There were a lot of FDs. Sometimes they were in Falken livery, sometimes they were not. It's really easy to get confused on what car is what still exists, what is gone. Can you and you said that people hit you up and like they're confused too on what car is what. Can you like break it down all the Apex FDs, the Falken FDs, and your car?
Yeah, for sure. So during like the 03 season, I mean, I had my red car at the time, but when it switched to white, like Apex had 2 cars that they built in Japan, like the 03 car, and they did a wide body car. They ended up converting both to wide bodies. But Apex Japan built 2 white FDs, and they both ended up having a Ridge kit, Vertex Ridge kit. US side started with like the non-Ridge kit that Apex R&D or Jensen and Len built out, and Gary as well.
And just really quick on that car, I think maybe because it looked identical to the Japanese car and it was designed that way, people don't really realize that there was a US Apex FD that looked exactly like Imamura's car. It was just right-hand or left-hand drive, and it had like an audio system in it. So you don't really know.
Yes, they did do. They were sponsored by Alpine, and it was for like a SEMA show that they had to display that. So they did audio on it. But during the events, it was all unbolted, and they could take it off, which was pretty cool. But yes, there was like 3 Apex cars, one US, 2 Japan cars, and then my car, I painted it white. And I always wanted a white FD, like before I even knew of Apex builds and all that. And then like I painted my car white after my red car in 04, and then like, but I got sponsored a different arrow. It was like Final Connection. So I wanted my car to look different than the Apex car, but I was sponsored by Apex, so I shared a lot of parts. And then I had like the 57 Pro gram lights that were the gold and with the like not 2-piece style lips. So I ran those wheels that Apex also used in their first version car. So there was times when I ended up switching it to like the white Vertex kit, and my car was white that had those wheels that kind of had like the version 1 Apex look
Yeah.
to it. And then I also had sponsored a C West version 2 kit. So I ran that with the Falken livery and white before that. So I had that with different wheels. And then, so my car, some of the Apex guys was even mentioning before, like it was kind of like the unofficial, like sister to the US, Apex car. Cause I literally used exact parts off of the car,
right.
Like their Vertex kit, their turbo setup. And then I bought from Len, actually the bigger AX75 92 turbine, the bigger IHI turbo. So when I did my newer motor with the ported setup, I ran the bigger turbo. And I'm not sure Apex will use that one because they switched to RX6, but I got that from Len and I used that setup for my upgraded motor build and ran that for a while. But at that point, it was wrapped Falken livery. So with the Falken FDs, there was actually
there are a lot.
three US Falken FDs that competed in Formula Drift. And then there was actually a fourth one that James Dean had out in Europe side.
Yeah.
That was a fourth one that was a little bit different. But the 3 US cars, 2 of them were built in 05. The main first one was the one that Tony Angelo drove and built in 05. And then Seigo Yamamoto had his SR right-hand drive FD. He only competed that in that 1 year in 05.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure what happened to that FD, but it either got sent back to Japan or something like that. And then Seigo started driving other cars like the S14 and he brought his Chaser and all that. So that car was short-lived, but that was the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift car too. So that was the right-hand drive because they wanted everything right-hand because it was supposed to be Japan. But Tony Angelo's car was what he drove in 05. And then after 05, like he moved on to do his own program. So that car was available and then it ended up being my backup car a bunch.
Okay.
When I had different incidents with the G35 and I would hop into that FD and then we did your show-offs and demoed in that car. And I even ran at like the Drift Mania like Canadian championship and did one event in that up there. But yeah, FDs were a little tricky. That setup on that car I was never fully comfortable with. It felt different in my car, maybe because it had like solid bushings all around. So I didn't do as well in that car as I wish I did. But I did place top 16 at Wall Speedway, like in that car, and then in a Formula D event. And then I did a D1 event in that car and my car. So I did have some decent amount of seat time in that
various
Falken
FDs.
FD.
Yeah.
And then that car got kind of like used as just a demo car that would give corporate ride-alongs during SEMA time and other things. And then
is that
Falken
car still around for demos? I think there is still an FD that I see. So
Falken sold that FD years ago. And then there was another like kind of Pro-Am driver, Noah, that bought it. And then he did some Pro-Am events with it and just wrapped it in black. And then there's a guy out in East Coast that's kind of buying a lot of like famous D1 cars. And like he bought that car from Noah, unwrapped it and showed the Falken livery. And he owns a restoration shop that restores like all these exotic cars.
Right.
So he has a kind of big shop that can restore cars at high level. But he restored it recently as of last year and then has been displaying it at different places. So it's back to like the original 05 spec.
So that guy Noah that bought that car was he the one that was driving it really hard and it was starting to look really beat up? That was the one. Okay.
That was the one. Yeah. So I didn't follow how many things that he did with it, but that was the original Falken car.
Got it.
And mine was wrapped from like 08 to 09. Falken livery.
And then while we're on the subject of cars that you were driving in FD, towards the end, you were driving an S15. Yes. It was an S15 in Falken livery, and there was a significant importance behind that car.
Yeah.
And I talk about it often in a lot of interviews. I bring it up. Was it this car? Was it that car? Can you talk to us about that S15?
So that S15 was the 03 spec HKS RS1. So that was the car, the original first version that HKS built for Taniguchi.
Yeah.
So
That was
the version.
that was the black and chrome, not the red and yellow, right? Or did it have both?
So I think black and chrome, I saw in one event, Keiichi drove it and actually crashed that one. So they might have built another one, but it was the one that Taniguchi competed in all of 03.
Yeah,
in.
that was the one where the first D1 was here and he lost to Ueo in it. It was that car.
Yes. And so he lost to Ueo. He tapped the back and hit the front on that 03 event. But they did the whole 03 D1 season in that car. And then in 04, they built the RS2. That was like a higher level build that they did.
A lot more fabrication, more horsepower, all of that.
Yeah, but it was interesting seeing the RS1 because the rear subframe was actually notched like an inch up, and then where the subframe sat higher in a unibody, just to kind of keep the roll centers, like better. But it made the car like have a lot of like forward bite, and then like it would want to strain out a lot. So I had some little time getting used to that setup because it didn't handle like other S chassis. So it was a little tricky to drive at first, but then I got used to it. But it was always like right-hand drive wasn't my normal comfort, but I had an HKS sequential, which made shifting easier.
Yeah.
But the HKS sequential was like hard to shift. You have to like really force and bang it in hard.
It looks like it when you see them shift.
Yeah, you have to like use a lot of force to engage it.
Yeah.
If you went too soft, it wouldn't get in gear and you would just be in neutral and it'll straighten you out.
Yeah.
So like that hurt me a couple of times, but then I think it was better that I had that versus like an H pattern. But I wasn't used to sequential, so sometimes I would get confused on what gear I was in.
Yeah.
So I would go up the gears and then I would downshift, and it didn't have a shift indicator to show what gear I was in. So I was like, oh crap, I don't know what gear I'm in. I'm just going to try this gear out and run it, So
it's like playing memory games while you're competing. It's like, I don't need another challenge here.
Yeah. So it was kind of tricky actually.
Yeah.
And then, but it was just such an honor to drive this car that I idolized along with the Apex FD.
For sure,
those were my 1 and 2 cars that everyone would, like be idolized. And then to be able to drive that was freaking amazing. And then like on the passenger airbag setup, they took it off and blocked it off with a carbon plate, and they had a sticker that said Knob Taniguchi and then the character, and that was the whole HKS team that worked on it.
Yeah.
And then like, so I was like, don't touch that. Leave that there because that's the only remaining remnants of it being in the RS1 like version.
Mm-hmm.
And before Falken got it, like Daijiro Yoshihara drove it with the Pac Rim team, and it became a rock star car and all that. And he was very successful in that. So props to Dai for driving that thing better than I did, because that guy's an awesome driver. But
the car changed a lot between him and you, right?
Yeah, it did a bit, but then it was still HKS style, which was cool. So that motor was like one of Jerry's backup motor that I think he had, and it was like a brand new built SR stroker motor that was just like the pinnacle freaking SR. Like
I remember the tuning philosophy for that car was make it like very responsive. So it wasn't peaky. It was the power band was very broad and even, and so it kind of didn't matter where you were in the RPM band. Like it wasn't not difficult to drive, which is what I remember. I don't know if that's how you got it.
Yeah. So it actually had a good torque band. It was super responsive. And it had power like throughout. It was a big power band. Like compared to my like stock S13 motor with the big Blitz, like, T5, like KKK turbo that Blitz had, like that thing had nothing until 5,000, and then it had a big meaty 5,000 to 7,000 power band.
Yeah.
But that stroker kit, dude, that thing would rip at like 3,000 and up, and that thing had like so much response. Like I was like, wow, it felt way stronger than my FD.
Yeah.
So that was the strongest car I had, and it felt more responsive than the G35's VQ even. So that was the strongest car I drifted, and it was like in the 500 range at that time, and that was a lot for an SR. So like that was, and it was super solid all year. Like it didn't break anything on the SR, and I built other SRs as for my 14s that I had a little trouble with and blown out some motors, but that motor was solid. So, I was super honored to drive that, and it kind of came full circle for me because it's like I started off idolizing that and the Apex car, and ended up building a car that represented that, and then like S chassis was my other route that I kind of had with my 14s, and then ended up with the 13s, and ended up with the S15. So that was a car I idolized back in 03 as well when it was out. And I was like, whoa, to be able to drive this was just an honor. So like, I really appreciate that opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thanks for sharing that story with us.
I love it.
So while all this was happening, you also wrote a drifting book.
Yes. So Antonio lined me up with that because he wrote a drifting book.
Yeah.
Ahead of that with motor books. So Antonio lined me up with a publisher, and then convinced them to title it Calvin Wan Drifting Performance Handbook. So I wrote that. Took way longer than I thought, and it was a huge project. And I'm not a big author writer thing, and then but I was able to pull it off. But had to ask for extensions to kind of get it done. It was
How
just
long
like
did
a
it take
big
you to
project.
Write?
It took probably a little longer than, I think they gave me initially 8 months, but I took longer than that.
It's very technical, and it's a very big book. And so I can only imagine how difficult it was to write that. And, drifting is a very visual kind of thing, or something where you have to experience to. So for you to put all that in words, that's hard. Yeah.
So I had to come up with that and figure out how to break that down and show some history and racing techniques, and then the drifting fundamentals. And then I kind of came up with concepts about how you break traction. Is either you break traction by accelerating the wheels and breaking traction, or decelerating the wheels. And so there's different initiations, or you just weight transfer. So I kind of broke down different types of initiations.
That was really good. I remember reading that, and I remember always thinking about it, but for you to put it into words and to categorize the different drifting techniques into those three things was genius. That was really good.
Yeah, appreciate that. And that didn't come from anywhere else. I just came up with that on my own. And then it was kind of based on the Drift Bible had all those different techniques, but it wasn't organized. It was just you could do all these different initiations, but I kind of categorized it in those three ways. And then and Antonio did all the photography on it. So we did a Japan trip. One of the Japan trips, we did a lot of photography that went into the book. And then he sourced from prior photography that he shot that went in it. The one thing I really regret that I didn't do was illustrations. I wanted to get illustrations in to kind of really show initiation points, braking zone, apex, and all the line control of it. I didn't I couldn't find a way to illustrate that properly. And then I kind of ran out of time with the writing portion of it. So I'm like, damn, I just used photography to illustrate that, but I didn't get the illustrations out. So I was disappointed in myself that I couldn't get that in. But I did work on another project with a friend, Alistair Kapati, with Driftsumie. So
that's right.
We did a whole drifting app that was all about illustration, and he line traced drift lines on it. And then, so it would populate a course in this kind of nice Zen-like sumie art. And then you would line trace your drift line and hit outer clipping zones, inner clipping zones, and do the ideal drift line. And you get credited on the points and how fast you drew the line. And then it would play back that drift line that you drew, and you score and advance to next levels. So I directed all that. And then I was kind of had a whole, had a dev guy build out the coding for it. But this was really early on, 08 era, where it was OS 4, I think that we even tested on the original iPhones, and it was only iPhone based. And it was really successful initially. It got put on New and Noteworthy and staff favorites.
It was really cool.
Banner ads. So we're oh, cool. And then it fell off, and all these other ads kind of pushed it down. And then every OS that came out would break it.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't launch. And by OS 6 time, it killed it. And then our dev guy got a full-time gig, and then only he knew how to do the code because it was super custom. So it kind of went away.
Yeah.
But I feel I kind of redeemed myself for not doing illustrations in the book with that app. But it was a little bit short-lived.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do a second edition for your book.
Yeah, maybe. I'll figure out something. I don't know if they want me to rewrite another one, but
can people still get that book today?
I think they had digital copies actually for a bit. They only did one initial print run of I think
Really?
5,000.
Oh.
Yeah. And there was a small batch and then they never reprinted. So all the copies that were out is all that's available.
Oh,
So
interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, I have one.
Yeah, you have one. Did you know
Oh, cool.
did you know that when we were doing when Drifting Pretty was kind of I mean, it's still educational, but when we were doing a lot of education to the members about, drifting, and we were doing a lot of learning through books and videos and stuff, that was a required book that we had the Drifting Pretty members buy. I don't know if you knew that.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So you were a part of the Drifting Pretty curriculum.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Like I just wrote based on what I knew, and I was trying to set it up a way where it's educational. And I would have random people come up and say, "Hey, like I have your book. Like, it actually taught me some things." So I was like, "Oh, that's sweet." Like, I'm glad I was able to contribute in that way, at least, And I did other instruction at events, hands-on with people, and do a lot of ride-alongs. So like the book kind of complemented all that. So I'm glad people actually did use it, and hopefully it helped a little bit. But yeah, like I'm glad I was able to get that out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I would tell the girls like, "Oh yeah, this is my friend. He wrote a book." And it was like it was a big deal, Calvin. And yeah, like I wrote a book, and like I know how it is, and that's in your book had so many more pages, and I'm just like, I don't know how you found time to do all that. So, and drive, because that was still when you were driving. So
yeah. So I was definitely doing all the events. But props to you on getting your book out, because I got fed with like this big publishing company that kind of did all the back end work. For you to be able to get down and do it all on your own and publish your book.
Man, the book game is tough, guys. Self-publishing is no joke. But yeah, good for you. 5,000 books is a big amount of books, like huge. So love it.
So appreciate that. Thanks.
Speaking of people learning, I know that since you transitioned over to your retirement from Formula D, you went on to get married and have 3 beautiful kids, and I kind of want to talk about current day for you now, and I know you're bringing up kids and they can see the internet now and find out about dad, and tell us how things are now as a parent. Yeah,
so the kids pretty much consume our whole entire schedule almost. So they're pretty busy with all the activities they're in. That was a big reason why I stepped away from drifting, because I had my daughter in 2010, and then my last stint was 2009 with Falken, and I was trying to run my own program. Economy wasn't good. I didn't get the engine sponsor I wanted, and I was building a 350Z at the time. But I had my daughter. I was like, I can't spend money running a program. I was kind of using this career, and I was getting paid at that before that. So I decided to step out and then like go back to school, got a degree, and all that. But like raising kids and being able to be at home and not travel like how I used to do in events was amazing. Like just seeing them grow, and they grow so fast. They are in a lot of activities like with softball and baseball. And then, so all 3 of them, so Chloe, is now, 13, Case is 11, and Camden is now 6. So we're kind of in the meat of like them doing all 3 of them in activities. We're outnumbered now. So Leah and I would like scramble, like getting them to their events, which is crazy amongst our normal 9-to-5 work schedule. So we get a lot of parents' help. So thank you to all those parent friends that help us. Thank you. But yeah, like we kind of do it on our own without actually family babysitting and all that. So we had to struggle and grind a lot. But my son, Case, is super into cars. So ever since, you have those signs of like what you want to be when you grow up. Since preschool, he's always said, I want to be a professional driver. Like I want to be a race car driver.
Like my dad.
So he knew. So he knew at an early age what you were doing.
Yes. So I guess he knew from, certain things. I wouldn't like show him a bunch of videos and things off the bat. Like he kind of asked, and I showed him here and there, and then I would have my Hot Wheels, and we got super into Hot Wheels and collect a bunch of that. And then so he just liked cars, and he would play a lot of video games, and they would play Gran Turismo. And, I would show them what's up at first. And then all of a sudden they would start smoking me. I'm like, God damn, I can't hang with you guys. And then even Camden, he's super good. Being 5-6 years old at playing Gran Turismo, where he's beating me now. And I'm like, dang it, dude, I got to get my freaking video game skills.
Did you get them
a
simulator?
I want to,
right?
I want to, yeah, because I used to play video games a lot. Because I rented PS1 from Blockbuster just to play this game called Tokyo Highway Battle with my friend Ed Leong and San Jose State days, and in our dorm, and we would stay up all night playing that in '96, and then get all pumped up and go drifting after playing that game, because it's all about drifting.
Yeah.
So I used to be good at video games, but it was old school controller with the dials, it was push directional buttons.
Right.
And they're all good with that joystick style. But we haven't translated into SimRig, which I want to get at some point soon, but they're just really expensive and I'm wanting to get one at some point. But Camden also plays FR Legends, and he gets a bunch of cars, and he could drift on the iPhone super good, where he even built my FD and could run Irwindale legit. I'm crashing all over the place in it. So I'm my little 6-year-old schooling me, dude.
Wow.
So both my boys are into cars. So Case now I had him going into the junior league at K1 speed. So in last year, 2022, we ran the entire season. We had to skip a year because of COVID, but he started right when he met that 48 height level, took a break during the COVID year, and then got back into it and ran the whole season last year. And then we skipped one round because we had to go on vacation, but he ended up finishing the whole season and won the whole thing by 1 point. So he was last year's champion in the San Francisco location. So after that, I was all right, you're down to move to the next step. So friend Jay Lapid had some old Tony carts, a cadet size cart and an adult cart. So I bought 2 carts from him, one for myself so I could train him and do drills and all that during the off season. And then one in his size, and it had the correct motor for this Rock Sonoma series that races at Sonoma Raceway on the kart track. So we prepped all off season. I did some drills and racing drills with him at different locations and at Sonoma a bunch. And then I start having him compete at Rock Sonoma from round 1 this year, through this whole year as his first time, in outdoor karting. So he's 11. And then in the mini class, they could have kids at 9 years old to 12. So he's actually older getting into it at 11. So he only has 1 more year at 12 years old to kind of get this cadet kind of kart class in. So this is his development year. He's still learning how to brake a bunch because in K1, he just stayed on it and didn't brake. So I'm K1 kind of teaches bad habits sometimes, but the outdoor karting, he's learning a lot, and then he's progressing really well. And he, there's some guys that's been in it for years driving. So he's the youngest, least experienced, not youngest, but least experienced guy. But last 2 rounds before, he ended up podium for the first time and got 2 third places back to back. So,
oh my gosh, Calvin.
It's in his blood.
That. Oh, I'm pretty envious. I'm so proud of you. That's so dope.
Yeah. So, and I got super lucky because I got supported with awesome crews during my Falken years, and they wrenched on a car for me. So I was so now it's payback because I'm wrenching on Case's car. And I'm oh my God, this is so much work, freaking wrenching all the time, the whole event and all that. Didn't realize how much work go-karts needed to do, during events.
Yeah.
But I connected with this big go-karting team called Speed Sense Motorsports, and then they actually are taking him on and giving some data training. They would log speed maps and then data do data with them, and then show points of where you could pick up speed, and we'll adjust gearing for it, and then review GoPro footage during the events to kind of improve lines. I'm wow, that's how race team works. We didn't even do that during Falken days. So I was cool, crazy.
So what's the end game though? Where is he going? Is he going to F1? What's the
F1
plan?
or FD? What is it?
Oh,
so I know. So initially, I was gonna have him race in Spec Miata at 13 because they have a Team Mazda challenge that you could start racing at 13 years old. So I was thinking of doing that. Spec Miata is pretty crazy, and you can get stuck in that because this is such a massive thing. But safety wise, I kind of actually prefer him drifting, and he actually likes drifting more. So we kind of went away from trying to go that racing route, maybe he might get into it, but he actually wants to drift. So
Oh man.
So I actually kind of threw him in. My friend Milton Rodriguez, he has some like E36s and 3s that we brought out to like a private event at Thunder Hill and did a skid pad. We booked out the small skid pad and I threw him in that automatic one, and then went through like, he never driven a car ever, but I was like, how can I teach him how to drive? I was like, I'll go off of Gran Turismo licensing thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, here, go in a straight line and stop at a mark, so you do that and then like floor it and get there and stop at this other mark and then turn left and do that and do it right and then circles and then did an autocross at the end. So I got him through the whole Gran Turismo kind of license A testing thing.
Nice.
In that track day. So I kind of did it that way.
Did you get a gold? What is it when you get a gold license or silver or bronze?
I was awarding him bronze, gold, and sometimes I gave him some gold, but I had to be kind of strict on.
You got to hold it back. You can't just give him golds.
You can't just take gold all the time. But he would strive for it, though, because in the real Gran Turismo, he would keep playing until he gets gold. Yeah. So I was like, that's proper.
That's good.
But yeah, at the end, he started doing donuts and all that.
Wow.
So I think I forgot to take out traction, so I didn't have good footage of him doing it really good. But we're trying to go back out again.
Wow.
But I did actually end up picking up another 190E. So I have a 190E that's a 2.316. That was a daily that I drifted a little here and there and done skid pads, just tried out. But I realized how awesome that chassis is. So super progressive. It reminds me of a S13 on how progressively it slides.
Okay.
You wouldn't think it would work that good, but it does. And then it grips really good. And I brought the Streets of Willow, gripped it. It's freaking amazing. And they even had bushing issues and it still handled well. So I picked up another chassis that was a salvage, like Copart, cheap, beat up chassis, but it was straight, non-rusted. And so I'm planning on building that car up in stages for him to drift earlier on. So, but I want to keep it low power at first because nowadays people just do these crazy builds and like LS off the bat.
You gotta be Bunta with the build.
Yes. And that's how in Japan, that's how they did it. So like Kumakubo has a drift school, like they want low power cars. Mm-hmm. You had to stay on that small drift course, like Driftland until you master that before you go to school course and master that before you go to the next course. So they had this very regimented way of instructing at different tiers. So I want to kind of do it that way where it's like, at least the car levels, like keep it NA, get a limited slip, but super low power first, train them like that, get them to learn technique before you use power to initiate drifts and all that, and then build it up in stages and increase the power.
Build the car as the skills get built too.
Yeah, exactly.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah, and then I chose that chassis because all the other cool chassis from our gen is so expensive now with how everything's going up. Like S chassis used to be like super cheap, but now they're like freaking 5-digit money. Whereas like, dude, like can't get that cheap like that before anymore. Yeah. So like, 190s are still kind of cheaper. And there's actually like this M104 motor that you can build up that's really stout. It's like the Mercedes 2J. So hopefully you can do that swap. Gonna work with like Dylan Jacobson, and he's the kind of a 16 valve guru guy. 190. So I'll figure out how to build that car the way I can. But that's kind of the plan for Case. And I want to get back into driver training a bit. Maybe work with different programs to kind of get drift training, maybe for some youth and other programs and all that. And I'm just trying to preserve my car because I kind of look at my FD as like kind of like a historic drift car, because it's kind of been through a lot of events and all that. So I want to preserve it to keep it period correct. Case is kind of into the older style cars too. So
no surprise there.
Yeah.
But hands off Dad's FD.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all kind of idolize the FD and want one of those, but I'm like, dude, you have no idea how expensive these chassis are now.
Never gonna happen, bro.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's
I'm like,
awesome.
Yeah.
So, what are you up to today that's drifting related? You mentioned that that you're working on something that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So I mean, like, nothing concrete. Is just kind of all like pre-planning stages, and working with different companies and collaborating with different people. But I want to get back into driver training. Kind of do some type of like drift type schools with cars or something like that. So we're still trying to figure that out. I want to do something in terms of like preserving drift history. Not sure exactly what, but like there's some iconic cars that are still around. I'm hoping to see more like of these old school cars that are still preserved, and it's cool seeing like Final Bout kind of have this older 2000 era builds and like people kind of like embracing that early style and like where things were built at a certain style. There's an aesthetic, and then there's also like the originality of the motors that came with it.
Yep.
And you do these builds in a way of how it was back then.
Yep.
It was more accessible. So I'm seeing how the current movement is where people just have these massive overbuilt cars right off the bat, and they're learning how to drift in these freaking like super strong cars, and you just got to roll on it and it starts drifting already. So that's not how we learn. Like it's
right.
You learn from like overpowering like lower power cars, and you use momentum to drift, and there's a lot of techniques that you have to use to drift low power cars that a lot of these newer people don't really know. So I'm hoping that there's a movement that shifts back to kind of like how it was back then, and use these lower power cars to be able to build technique before you graduate to higher levels. Yeah. So hopefully I can figure out some kind of platform that can showcase that, and utilize that, and maybe with some events with some iconic historic drift cars and all that. And so it's all kind of just in my head. I'm kind of working with certain people to maybe do something, but
I love the idea, and I love the thought process behind it. And it's in a way it is preservation of the drifting culture, but it's also promoting that you have to have a strong foundation if you want to be really good. If this is something that you really love, work on your foundation before you progress, right? And don't skip a bunch of steps. I'm all for that. And if there's any way we can help, let us know.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. You guys have a great platform of kind of showcasing all these OGs that's been in the scene and let them speak on like what they experienced over the years. So you're educating how things were back then by having this podcast. So I commend you guys for interviewing all the people you have and having this platform for people to be able to speak to it, because it's hard to bring this up in normal conversations.
It really is.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Especially if your name's Calvin Wan and totally humble. I'm sure nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
You've kept it under lock.
Yeah. Like I'm not the kind of person to put it out there like that, but if it comes up, I'll speak to it. So thank you for having me. Like,
awesome. It's our honor to have you on. We're so glad to be able to reconnect with you and see that, you're still the same Calvin, but you're in a different place in your life. And now you're kind of bestowing all of your experience and knowledge to your kids and kind of, bringing them up and kind of investing in their potential. It's really cool to see.
I hope Case doesn't sneak out your FD.
I know. I'm like worried about that, because back then when I was getting my license before that, I would try to sneak out cars here and there.
You better check that drive shaft out.
Put all those cameras. Know. Get some cameras in there too.
Yeah, that guy doesn't wrench as much as I'd like him to, so I'll just disable
that's good.
the car.
That's good.
Know what to do.
Just a little fuse. Take out a fuse would be good.
Yeah. That's your theft deterrent. Don't teach him how to work on cars.
I know, but I need some help, because
I
can't just be wrenching the whole
Chloe
time.
Can help. Chloe can help.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I don't know. She's less into cars than the boys. And, she's got the whole softball thing going on her side. So
nice.
They all got their thing going on.
Yeah, as they do. I love it.
Yeah. So we're gonna close this out. Is there anything else that we missed that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's it. I mean, like it's been an honor to kind of like talk with you guys and be invited for this podcast. So
of course,
appreciate that. And
you're definitely one of the earliest drifting guys in NorCal, and you had a very successful career doing Formula D and D1, and you were very high profile. Also, just you had an iconic car. Like you had one of the coolest cars that was drifting when we first started in like 2003 in an FD. That was so cool, right? way better than our little Nissans and stuff. You know, like you were drifting with like a sports car. That was so cool. But yeah, you're so humble, and it's cool that you've done all this stuff. And now that we've got all of this recorded, your kids will know what you've done, and they get to hear about all of Dad's war stories and all the accomplishments he's made without having to tell your kids like, hey, look at all my accomplishments. I know you're not that kind of person, so I'm glad to be able to get your story in this format so your grandkids can hear, your great-great-grandkids can hear what a cool guy great-great-grandpa was. So yeah, I mean, definitely thank you for what you've contributed to the culture, and the fact that you're still looking for ways to give back. Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate that. I guess kind words and all that, and I kind of, ever since that first moment, like I knew drifting is something that I'll kind of still be in it forever at some point, and something that I just like. I miss driving so much from kind of not being around these days. So I'm trying to find ways to get back into it. So now that Case is into it, I'm like, yay, I found a way to kind of get back into it somehow. So I'm going to, start, being around more events, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm just busy with the kids, but if they're involved in it, that's kind of part of what I got to do. So like, I'm looking forward to the day to be able to like tandem with them,
awesome.
And like be able to like do events, and drive together, because that's what I always think about. Like I still miss drifting on the track and all that, and I don't get to do that much nowadays. So if I can do that with my kids, that's even better, So
full
looking
circle.
forward to that day.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
Yes.
Yeah. Let us know.
Too.
Yeah. Let us know. I want to observe that with my own eyes.
Yeah. Well, we have 4 possibilities, so the odds are good that maybe we'll get one.
Yeah.
So
yeah, our girls are starting to get into it. We're like you, where we're not putting it in their face all the time, like like showing them drifting videos all the time, and we kind of let them figure out what they're into, and 2 of them so far are really into drifting, and so we'll see.
Nice.
We're kind of in that same place where we see the interest, and so now that we see the interest, we're kind of exposing them to it more, and maybe one day it'll end up where you want to be, where you're drifting on the track with them. So
that's awesome. Let me know. Like we'll set up like little private events to kind of train them on all that. Like bring your kids up. You guys got functional cars and all that, or other cars like your Z that you're trying to drift to. Like bring them out. Like we'll just instruct them like old drift day days.
Let's do it. Like let's do it. I'm down.
Do that.
Old heads.
Yeah,
parents and kids. Parents and kids day.
Daddy and mommy and me.
Get all the kids going. It'll be like the new old school drift association crew. Like
Hey, Calvin, do you remember the over 40s team at Drift Day? Do you remember that?
Yes.
That's us, man.
That. Oh my god. I thought they were like really old back then.
I know.
And I'm like, oh, we're still young. Like 40s. Wow, that sounds so freaking old. And we're like deep in 40s now. I'm like, oh my god, like we gotta get going on driving before we get too old and don't want to drive anymore or something. I don't know.
Or not physically able to.
Right? Yeah. It's like, man, it's my mind is still back in that era, but my body is not.
No kidding.
Like we cannot hang anymore.
Yeah. I feel that.
All nighters are tough and all
it's
that.
All good. We still look good.
Yeah.
Okay, you gotta give us some credit. We
no, you guys still look the same, so props.
No, you do too. Asian don't raisin.
That Asian blood. We got the look, but then physically we're probably hurting.
Yeah. I'm huffing and puffing after I go to the track now.
Yeah. It's tougher out there nowadays. You can't hang like before.
All right. Anyway, it was good talking to you. Thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you at the track with the kids.
Yes. Let's do it.
All right.
That's the plan.
Thanks, Calvin.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's our honor. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Salady Mania Podcast Season 2, brought to you by Falken Tires, produced by Benson Sue and Nadine Sue, audio and video engineering by Mark Mondoy, Graphic design and motion graphics by Steve Nakamura. Got a question or comment for us? Call or text us on our hotline at 323-607-6075, and maybe you can be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you download your podcasts.